Hey guys, tonight we step into a world of whispers, shadows, and really bad foot hygiene. You're crouched in a smoke-stained chapel, surrounded by strangers in tattered cloaks. The air reeks of sweat, damp wool, and something metallic blood? Maybe. You kneel on a floor that hasn't seen a mop since the Crusades, and before you lies a shriveled relic, a toe bone, allegedly from some long-dead martyr, but more likely just a pig knuckle. Still, you press your forehead to it as instructed and repeat the vow, in Latin, which you don't speak. Welcome to your first night as a medieval assassin. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always cool seeing where you guys are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes dart to the stone wall. A candle flickers beside a shelf lined with various murder tools, none of which look remotely clean or effective. One's literally just a sharpened spoon. The master, who resembles a compost heap in robes, paces with the limp of someone who's been stabbed more times than hugged. He tells you this is a sacred order, an elite brotherhood, and then immediately reminds you that if you speak of it to anyone, even a goat, you'll be buried alive under turnips. Your training starts at dawn, which, spoiler, comes before your legs stop cramping from kneeling. You're given a meal of watery gruel and a slice of bread hard enough to cut rope with. Your first lesson: silence. Not just quiet, but vanish into the background of history's silence. You learn to breathe less loudly, walk without footfalls, and hold your fart until someone coughs. Historians still argue whether the real medieval assassin orders were as organized as pop culture suggests, or if they were more like desperate mercenaries with a flair for theatrics. Either way, you're in it now, reciting oaths you barely understand in exchange for vague promises of coin, status, and spiritual clarity, though that might just be dehydration hallucinations. Your daily training routine involves things like balancing on damp beams over spiky barrels, crawling silently through sheep pens, and meditating on a cold slab until your soul detaches from fear. You mostly detach from feeling in your rear end. One of your mentors, a grizzled woman named Anise, shows you how to apply ash to your face to hide shine. She smells like garlic and menace. When you ask how many people she's killed, she just blinks and says, "You ever get a fish?" You nod. Then you already know too much. Every now and then, new trainee vanishes. One day they're beside you, fumbling with a throwing knife, and the next, poof. The official word is they were sent on their first mission. The unofficial whisper is that they failed step 2. Don't ask questions. You decide to stop asking how long this training lasts. It's probably better not to know. One afternoon, you're told to climb the back wall of the monastery. It's covered in moss, slick with centuries of rain. You fall. Twice. On the third attempt, you make it halfway up and discover the test includes dodging rotten fruit thrown by the instructors. The pear hits you square in the eye. Dead, someone mutters. You lie awake that night on your bed of straw, which is generously shared with several types of beetles, wondering if you've made a mistake. The stars above the broken window seem to judge you. Or maybe that's just the cold. You overhear someone whispering about a real mission, a noble who wants his cousin removed before he inherits something valuable. You don't ask questions. You just nod and practice how to disappear into a shadow again, despite the fact that shadows around here are full of rats and used candles. One bit of training involves using the scent map. Apparently, different districts smell like different kinds of tanneries, breweries, or worse. You're told to memorize them in case you need to navigate blind. This sounds made up, but then again, you do notice a distinct cabbage and urine aroma near the north gate. A fringe theory you overhear one night suggests that some assassins used honey mixed with coal dust to dull their scent to dogs. Others just smear themselves in mud. You're assigned to the honey group. It's sticky. You're a walking dessert. Bees follow you. You ask if you're allowed to have a name. The answer is only if you plan to die with it. So you go nameless. You become the quiet shape at the edge of the firelight. The one who sharpens your spoon dagger and eats your hard bread without complaint. Your first test kill is a pig. It's not symbolic. Just a pig that escaped the butcher. But the instructors watch how you stalk, how you approach, how you finish. You hesitate. The pig does not. It rams you in the thigh and bolts. You fail. They laugh. A week later, you get a second chance. This time, the pig loses. That night, you dream of pigs whispering in Latin. Eventually, you're trusted with more. You're told to watch a merchant for 3 days without being seen. You learn how to melt into a crowd, how to pretend to inspect apples, how to yawn without suspicion. You also learn that people talk to themselves. A lot. Especially about cheating at dice. And then, at long last, the master tells you that you're ready for your first real mission. You feel proud. For about 3 seconds. Because the mission is 4 towns away, it's snowing, and the target is a drunk baron who never leaves his private sauna. You pack your spoon. You whisper your vow again. You set out on your first journey, full of righteous purpose, hidden blades, and the gnawing feeling that maybe, just maybe, you should have joined a monastery instead. You trudge through slush that soaks your boots within minutes, and the road ahead turns into a slippery ribbon of despair. The trees lean overhead like they're judging your posture, and the only other soul you've seen since dawn is a very angry goose. You're cold, underfed, and probably underqualified, but you've got a job to do. Your very first real mission. And step 1 is simply getting there without dying. Which, in medieval Europe, is honestly an achievement by itself. Your first taste of initiation in the field isn't glamorous. It involves bribing a toll guard with your last hunk of dried eel, pretending to be a tinker with no wares, and sleeping under a hay cart with a family of fleas who have clearly claimed a spot as their ancestral homeland. When you finally reach the outskirts of the town where your target resides, you're not greeted by a whispering contact or a hooded informant. No, you get a barkeep with half an eyebrow, a suspicious stew, and a room that smells like spoiled mead and unresolved trauma. The bedsheet crunches when you sit down. You choose not to ask why. The Baron, your target, is a portly nobleman with a taste for imported wine and other people's wives. He's constantly surrounded by hired muscle and never appears in public without 2 things: a bodyguard who looks like a mountain with legs, and a pet monkey wearing a tiny chainmail vest. Historians still argue whether this monkey ever helped thwart a real assassination attempt, but the chainmail suggests someone expected trouble. Your instructions are vague. Make it look like an accident. No noise. No trail. Classic. So you begin the assassin's truest test. Not the kill, but the wait. You what? 4 days. From windows. From roofs. From under carts that absolutely should not be holding your weight. You learn the patterns. When the Baron bathes, late. When he gets drunk, always. And when he dismisses his guards, never. On the 3rd night, someone tries to mug you in an alley. You don't panic. You use the trick a niece taught you, yell fire, and kick them in the shin. It works. Barely. You walk away with a bruised arm and an important realization: you're not the most dangerous person out here. Not yet. You finally spot a chance. The Baron is led to his bathhouse, alone, except for the monkey, which seems preoccupied with attacking a fruit bowl. You slip through the side entrance, your heart pounding louder than it should. The steam cloaks the room like a curtain. The Baron hums tunelessly from behind a wooden partition. You've trained for this. You step quietly. You've greased your blade. You've memorized the floor plan. And then you sneeze. Loudly. Violently. Unexpectedly. The Baron screams. The monkey screams louder. You bolt out the side door just as the guards come crashing in. You're not sure what they saw. Just a blur, maybe. A figure. A shadow. But it's enough to send the whole town into lockdown. You spend the night wedged between 2 chimneys, freezing and listening to armored boots clank through alleyways below. This is initiation, not the kill, not the oath. The bitter taste of failure clinging to your tongue while you shiver on a roof, wondering what would have happened if you brought a scarf. The next day, a contact finds you. He doesn't say his name, just tosses you a hunk of cheese and tells you to follow. You limp behind him to an abandoned bell tower where the master is waiting. You expect anger, maybe worse, but he just stares for a long time and says, "Now you know." You ask, "Know what?" He says that it's not about the kill. It's about everything around it. The way people move, the way wind carries noise, the way your nose betrays you. Then he laughs, quietly, and hands you a scrap of parchment. Asterisk new assignment. New town. Do better asterisk. Before you leave, the master does give you a parting gift, a vial of something dark and sticky. Put 2 drops in his wine, he says, and do not, under any circumstances, spill it on yourself. You know it. You really want to ask what it is, but you're learning. The next target is easier. A corrupt magistrate with a love of plum brandy and late-night poetry. You slip into his kitchen disguised as a servant, wait for him to pour a drink, and nudge the vial just slightly. 2 drops. He never notices. He dies in his sleep, reportedly from natural causes and poor diet. You're not congratulated. You're given travel instructions and a potato. It's lukewarm. That night, you sit by a stream, watching fireflies float across the dark water. You finally feel like you understand why initiation is so brutal. It's not just to weed out the weak. It's to remind you, this isn't glory. This isn't honor. This is a life of narrow escapes, ugly meals, and a very high chance of dying in a ditch. You can't rely on luck, or even skill, really. You rely on habit, instinct, that feeling in your gut that says, not tonight, and the discipline to listen. A fringe practice you've heard murmured about is the use of death songs, tunes whispered under breath to control panic before a kill. You try humming one the next time you get nervous. It helps. Maybe. Or maybe it's just nice to have a melody in your head while you climb a manure cart. Initiation doesn't end with a ribbon or a handshake. It ends when you stop waiting for it to end. When the kill feels like a task, not a test. When you stop dreaming of triumph and start hoping for clean socks. That's when you know. You wake up in a barn, surrounded by chickens, with a note pinned to your sleeve. Asterisk new job. 2 days. Try not to sneeze this time, asterisk. You arrive at the edge of a village so small it doesn't even bother pretending it's on a map. Your boots are more whole than leather by now, and your bed tonight, if you can call it that, is a half-collapsed grain shed with a friendly family of squirrels who are not thrilled to share the space. This, apparently, is your safe house. Welcome to the housing perks of a medieval assassin. You drop your pack onto the uneven floorboards, which immediately creak like they're filing a complaint. There's one blanket, thin as a prayer, a cracked clay mug that smells faintly of turnips and stronger of mildew. You settle onto your straw bedding, which is mostly just kindling with opinions. Try not to think about the things crawling nearby. Despite the romantic image of assassins ducking into candlelit hideouts stocked with maps and weapons, the truth is, if you're lucky, you sleep somewhere dry. If you're unlucky, you sleep standing up in a root cellar while a goat chews your hem. Historians still argue whether designated safe houses even existed, or if most agents just made do with whatever unclaimed ruins they could find. You make do a lot. The ruins, at least, have atmosphere. There's a particular charm to curling up under a broken archway, watching moonlight spill across shattered mosaic tiles, wondering whether the original owner died in a war or just got fed up with the drafty acoustics. Sometimes a local shepherd knows of a cave you can use. Other times you sleep in a hollow tree. One time, it was an abandoned dovecot cozy, but every time the wind blew, feathers floated down like judgment. The thing no one warns you about is the smell. Not of you, you've made peace with your own bouquet, but of the dwellings. Moldy, damp, and perpetually one dead rodent away from haunting. One safe house you're assigned to sits beside a tannery. The fumes give you dreams of floating through a leather-scented purgatory. You wake up twice convinced your nose is melting. There's also the lice. You learn to carry a little pouch of ashes to dust yourself with, and sleep with nettle leaves under your tunic, supposedly a deterrent. It doesn't work. The lice come anyway, as do the fleas, and something you never quite identify, but that definitely bites. The fringe remedy you overhear one night. Soak your clothes in vinegar and urine. You try it. The pests remain. Your social life does not. In wealthier towns, you might occasionally rent a room above a tavern, pretending to be a traveling notary or spice seller. But those rooms are loud, nosy, and full of drunk patrons who think mysterious loner means please tell me your tragic backstory while we share a jug of cider. You end up slipping out the window more often than not. Once, a fellow assassin named Tav whispers to you during a mission layover. He claims the best places to sleep are under church floors. Not in crypts, but under the actual wooden boards. They never check under holiness, he says with a wink. Later, you try it. It's dark, it's dusty, and you can hear every sermon word for word through the cracks. One priest preaches for 3 hours about weak morality. You leave spiritually confused and physically cramped. Of course, sometimes the guild provides. If you're on assignment in a city with a strong assassin network, you might get a proper flat shared, obviously. Your bunkmate will have a mysterious cough, a terrifying laugh, and a tendency to sharpen things while sleep-talking. But the bed has real wool stuffing, the windows shut properly, and there's even a chamber pot. Luxury. You decorate with things you can carry, mostly out of habit. A whittled charm, a dried flower from someone you never got to kill, a coin with a hole through the middle. Sentimental items that wouldn't look like much in daylight, but at night, in your damp corner of the world, they feel like armor. There's a rotating list of places you know to avoid. One is a bridge underpass that floods with zero warning. Another is a hollowed-out hayloft that collapsed mid-snore, nearly suffocating its sleeper in angry chickens. And then there's the infamous Lice Lodge, a shack in the woods where every assassin who's stayed there has come out scratching. No one's entirely sure if the lice were metaphorical, or if the place was cursed, or both. You pick your sleeping spots with care. Is there a back exit? Does it look recently used? Are there too many spiders? You carry a little mirror to peek around corners before entering abandoned places, an old trick learned from a niece who once lost 3 toes to a bad floorboard in a hidden bear trap. Your least favorite shelter by far was an abandoned bathhouse. It looked promising, tiles, walls, even a dry spot near the furnace. But it turned out to be haunted, or infested, or possibly just cursed with acoustics that made every creak sound like whispering. You lasted 4 hours. One night, while you're huddled in a broken dovecot again, listening to a rat chew something disturbingly bone-like, you remember the comfort of your childhood bed, straw mattress, thick quilt, and the warm stench of your uncle's pipe drifting in through the wall. You almost miss it. Almost. Then the rat makes eye contact, and you reconsider nostalgia entirely. The truth is, being an assassin isn't glamorous. It's not luxurious. It's not even particularly cool most days. It's sleeping in places no one else wants. Hiding behind sacks of flour. Waking up with hay in your ear. Washing in puddles and pretending it counts as hygiene. You learn to value small comforts, a warm stone to rest your feet on, a roof that doesn't leak directly into your face, a rat that minds its own business. Historians love to debate whether these lone agents lived in cells beneath fortresses or kept moving constantly. The answer is probably both. A little bit of base, a whole lot of bad decisions, and a few lucky nights where the floor is flat and the roof is solid. Tonight, you roll onto your side. The wind slips through the gaps in the boards and brushes against your neck like a cold finger. You pull your cloak tighter, listen to the distant sound of church bells. and fall asleep wondering if anyone ever truly feels safe in a safe house. You wake to the unmistakable sound of something scurrying across your chest. Could be a mouse. Could be your imagination. Either way, you don't scream. Asterisk, that's progress star. You flick it away and sit up slowly, joints popping like old furniture. Another morning in another cold, damp hideaway, and you're expected to blend in with the locals today. You know what that means. It's time to become someone else. You slip into your makeshift disguise, an itchy wool tunic 2 sizes too large, and a belt that smells like it was tanned with onions. You got a leather pouch of coins, none real, and a forged parchment declaring you a licensed poultry appraiser. Nobody knows what that means. That's the point. Disguise isn't just about clothes. It's how you walk, how you blink, how you scratch your neck when someone looks too long. You practice your slouch. You let your mouth hang slightly open like someone who once lost a bar bet involving molasses and hasn't fully recovered. If you're going to pull off deception in a medieval world, you gotta act like you belong. Asterisk, which often means acting like you're confused about everything star. In town, the market bustles with noise, clanging bells, shouting vendors, goats being uncooperative. The air smells like fresh bread and old fish. You blend in perfectly. No one glances twice. That's the goal. You're not a shadow in an alley. You're just another peasant trying to trade eggs for a bit of wool. But blending in takes effort. You have to know the rules. Asterisk, unspoken 1 star. For example, never make eye contact with a town reeve unless you want a spontaneous tax inspection. Always nod politely at older women carrying turnips. And whatever you do, don't stand near a well for too long, or people will start thinking you're either gossiping or plotting to poison it. Either way, not great for your cover. Your target today is a merchant, wealthy, paranoid, surrounded by guards who look like they eat rocks for breakfast. He's in town for a festival and will be attending a feast tonight. You don't plan to attend. You plan to serve the wine. Getting into the kitchen isn't hard. You tell them you're the nephew of someone important sounding, and you carry a bucket. People don't question a man with a bucket. You learn this early. Tools are better than titles. Walk through a guarded door with a sword. You'll be questioned. Do it with a broom? You're invisible. In the back rooms of the manor, servants bustle around carrying trays, whispering gossip, and stepping over the cook's cat, who seems to think it owns the building. You keep your head down, your eyes open. Your disguise holds. No one notices you're not supposed to be here, because you are supposed to be here. You act like you belong. You carry things. You nod at other staff. You even grumble about the quality of the stew, just to really sell it. Someone agrees with you. You feel oddly proud. Still, the pressure is always there. One wrong glance, one slip of the tongue. You remember a niece telling you, never speak more than 3 words if you don't have to. Words carry accents. Accents carry questions. So today, you're the strong, silent type. You shrug. You frown. You occasionally mutter, "Eh." You slip the vial of sleeping draught into the merchant's wine as he laughs too loudly in the next room. Not poison, asterisk not this time star. Just something to send him into a slumber, so deep he won't notice when you return that night to search his things. The job's not a kill. It's an information grab. A ledger with names. The sort of book that could cause quite the scandal if it were to fall into the wrong hands. There's a fringe trick among the older assassins. Hide a small peppercorn under your tongue during jobs that require silence. It keeps you alert, sharpens your focus. You try it. It mostly makes your eyes water. Still, you don't fall asleep on the job, so that's a win. The hard part isn't slipping the potion into the cup. It's staying invisible after. You stand by the kitchen doorway, arms folded, face blank, heart thudding against your ribs like a trapped bird. The merchant drinks. He laughs again. Then he sways. No one notices when 2 guards help him to his room. You follow. 5 minutes later, posing as the servant with a water jug. The room is lavish. Tapestries, velvet cushions, a bed that could swallow a goat whole. The merchant snores like a dying bull. You slip the ledger from his satchel. You leave no trace. That's what makes disguise so important. It's not just to get in, it's so they never realize you were there at all. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins actually used elaborate disguises regularly, or if that's a romantic invention layered on by storytellers centuries later. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You wear what gets the job done. If that means dressing as a monk, you recite 3 fake prayers and hope no one notices your sandals are stolen. If it means pretending to be a beggar, you smear soot on your face and cough convincingly. But here's the thing about pretending to be someone else. Eventually, you forget where the pretending ends. One night, you catch your reflection in a puddle and don't recognize the eyes looking back. That's when you realize you haven't used your real name in months, maybe years. You don't even remember the last time you said it aloud. That thought should bother you. Instead, you just step over the puddle and move on. The ledger reaches your contact by dawn. You're not thanked, just handed a new identity, a new tunic, a new town. You slip into the new role like old boots. This time, you're a candle maker, or maybe a rat catcher. You haven't decided yet, but you've got a patchy beard glued to your chin and a plan in your head. You're not a person anymore. You're a role, and you play it better than anyone. You arrive in your next town under a slate-colored sky that can't decide whether it wants to rain or just look disappointed. The cobblestones are slick, the air smells like overcooked onions and wet horse, and the gate guard waves you through with the enthusiasm of a man 10 years into the wrong career. You are now officially a candle maker again. But before you can do anything, there's something far more pressing: food. You haven't had a proper meal in 3 days, unless you count half a raw turnip and a handful of boiled weeds you found growing behind a bathhouse. You do not. So now begins the daily ritual of trying to eat without dying, going broke, or being recognized. Here's what they don't tell you about being an assassin. You spend a surprising amount of time thinking about soup. Not the thrilling, poison-laced kind, just regular, hot soup. Broth is currency. Stew is salvation. And slice of stale bread you don't have to fight a dog for? That's basically heaven. You shuffle into a tavern that smells like smoke, sweat, and questionable decisions. The innkeeper eyes you suspiciously, probably clocking your uneven beard and eyes that scream sleeps outdoors. You order the cheapest thing on the menu. It's technically soup. You're technically grateful. The bowl arrives lukewarm and alarmingly gray, like someone boiled sadness. You eat it anyway, slowly, with reverence, and a little fear. Historians still argue whether assassins were paid in regular coin or more creative arrangements. A roof for the night, a sack of barley, the promise of not being reported to the authorities. You'll take any of the above. Coin's ideal, but bartering is king, especially when you're constantly changing names and faces. You once traded a lockpick for a jug of cider and a clean blanket. It felt like robbery, on your part. Sometimes your meals come from sympathetic locals, not because they know what you are, but because you look like what you aren't. Starving monk, traveling bard, broken soldier. You found that people are far more generous with people who appear to have suffered in poetic ways. There's also theft. Not your favorite, not your forte. But occasionally, when the hunger curls so sharp in your belly it could double as a weapon, you lift a crust from a merchant's cart, or swipe an apple while bumping into a butcher. You always feel bad about it for about 30 seconds. Then the apple hits your stomach and your conscience goes quiet. Once, you help a local herbalist gather mushrooms in exchange for a hot meal and a lesson in identifying poisonous varieties. You learned a lot that day, especially that most mushrooms look like death wearing a hat. You also learned that mushroom stew, even made with safe ones, has a 50-50 chance of triggering apocalyptic stomach cramps. You learn to ration, to hoard, to eat slowly, to appreciate cold porridge. You carry a small pouch of dried meat that's older than your current alias. You've got a few hard biscuits that could shatter a tooth, but when soaked in ale, they're almost edible. One assassin years ago gave you a recipe for what she called field fare. It's a miserable mix of barley, salt, and wild greens, boiled in whatever liquid you can scavenge, including snowmelt, beer, or one deeply questionable puddle. You still make it sometimes when things get rough. It tastes like punishment. It feels like survival. There's a fringe theory among some guild members that eating onions daily wards off suspicion and illness. You try it for a week. Everyone avoids you, including your handler. It works too well. The worst meal you ever had? A loaf of bread left too long on a road. You broke off a piece, bit down, and found it infested with worms. You stared at it for a moment, considered your options, then kept chewing. You weren't proud, but you were no longer hungry. You dream of feasts sometimes, of roasted birds, golden and crackling, of tarts filled with honey and dates, of cheese that doesn't taste like regret. Then you wake up to a few stale beans and a flat beer. It's fine. Dreams are supposed to be aspirational. Sometimes you're lucky. A noble you've been assigned to spy on throws a banquet. You slip in dressed as a servant and steal from the kitchens. Grapes, roasted roots, a piece of tart so sweet it brings tears to your eyes. You wrap a slice of ham in cloth, eat it later under a bridge while dogs bark in the distance. That, you think, was one of your best meals. There are open debates in the guild, real, whispered arguments about whether it's better to eat before a kill or after. Some say before keeps your hand steady. Others argue that eating after makes it taste like victory. You fall somewhere in the middle. You just want to eat safely, without needing to check your spoon for blood. Today's job is a simple one. Pass along a message to a contact disguised as a carpenter. You do it quietly, without fuss. And for your trouble, he gives you a wedge of cheese, a slab of bread, and a small bottle of ale. You eat in an alley, sun on your face, hands warm around the bottle. This is as close to luxury as it gets. You savor every bite, not just because it's good, but because you know what waits on the other side of hunger. The aches, the dizziness, the way your fingers start to tremble when your body runs out of patience. You've gone 3 days before, once far. You don't ever want to test that limit again. So you chew slowly. You swallow with gratitude. And you remind yourself you don't have to enjoy the job, but you do have to survive it. And sometimes surviving means eating food that smells like feet and tastes like despair. Bon appetit. You're ankle deep in swamp water by sunrise, clutching a crumpled map that smells faintly of mildew and panic. The job said light travel, which in medieval terms usually means 2 days of dodging brigands, wolves, and dysentery just to find a shack full of secrets. This time, it means a hike through the marsh of St. Blister's Hollow, a name that inspires precisely zero confidence. You're here for a dead drop, a hollowed-out tree where another assassin supposedly left a message. But the tree, like most things in this forsaken job, is surrounded by bugs that look like they've been doing push-ups since the plague. They swarm your face, drawn to the sweat, and you sweat half-heartedly while trying to stay balanced on the root. A mosquito bites your eyelid. Naturally. And this asterisk is what people forget when they fantasize about medieval assassins. They picture the daggers, the cloaks, the whispered deaths at moonlight. They never picture the part where you slog through marshland with one wet boot, a stomach full of cold beans, and a rash developing in places you'd rather not name. Your fingers find the tree hollow. Inside, rolled parchment wrapped in oilskin. Mission instructions, probably. Or a shopping list. Honestly, could be either. This is the logistics part of the job. The boring part. but it's also the glue that holds the guild together. You're a courier as much as a killer. You memorize safe paths between towns, shelter spots in the woods, which village priests look the other way for a coin or two. You're your own supply chain. No horses, no fancy saddlebags, just your boots, your memory, and your absolute loathing for medieval roads. Because medieval roads are a joke. Mud in the dry season, quicksand in the wet. Most bridges are just logs someone swore at once. And good luck with signage. If a crooked wooden plank pointing vaguely east counts as a sign, then sure, you've seen plenty. You rely on tricks passed down through the guild. Follow the moss, count fence posts, look for the willow tree that leans like it's been drinking. Once, you used a trail of broken snail shells to find a hidden grove. The man who taught you that swore by it. He also swore at it when it led straight into a briar patch. One fun fact, some medieval assassins are rumored to have used coated chalk marks to signal safe houses or traps to other members. Little symbols scratched into fence posts, well walls, even on gravestones. You start to notice them everywhere once you know how to look. A triangle by a doorway might mean food and rest. A curled spiral? Don't trust the baker. You've seen that one more times than you'd like. You rest under a tree, chewing dried plum and trying to ignore the ant crawling across your sleeve. The message you just picked up directs you to a convent 3 leagues away. Your contact will be disguised as a novice nun. You're to arrive pretending to deliver honey. You don't have honey, but you do have a convincing smile and a beeswax candle you can pretend is sample product. You follow the old Roman road that still cuts through the forest, overgrown and barely passable. You trip twice, curse once, and start humming to keep your pace. It's not a song, really, just something vaguely melodic and miserable, like a medieval dirge with more rhythm than notes. It passes the time. On the way, you pass a pair of traveling minstrels. They nod politely. You grunt. You used to like minstrels. Then you worked a job involving one. He sang a ballad so long you fell asleep standing up. Now, anytime you hear a lute, your eye twitches. You spend a night in a roadside shrine. The air is cold, the floor is harder, and the statue of Saint Wulfur glowers at you from the corner like she knows exactly how many lies you've told this week. Probably 5, maybe 6, depending on how you count. I'm just a humble candle maker when asked what you do for work. By morning, your knees ache, your stomach's empty, and your candle is beginning to melt in the heat of your pack. You arrive at the convent just after morning prayers. The walls are whitewashed stone, the nuns quiet, the garden neat. A peaceful place. But behind every garden is a tangle of secrets, and behind every nun's habit could be a dagger or a smuggled note. Your contact meets you in the herb garden, pretending to pluck sage. She doesn't look at you, just says softly, "The bees are angry this year." It's the code phrase. You respond, "They missed the lavender." She hands you a pouch. Inside, another message, some coin, and a vial of something thick and blue. "For sleep," she murmurs. Or nightmares. You don't ask which. Historians still argue whether assassin guilds had formal networks of communication like this, or whether it was all improvisation and whispered favors. Some say there were entire postal routes run in secret, using bakers, monks, even children. Others argue that's just wishful thinking. But one thing's certain, when the job spans dozens of miles, you learn how to move quietly and carry everything you need in one small, lumpy bag. You leave the convent with a nod and no backward glances. Travel light, walk steady, look like you belong. Your next destination is a port city 3 days south. Another courier job, another disguise, another round of swamp water stew, and questions you can't answer. Along the way, you pass a ruined inn with a collapsed roof. There's a note hidden under a floor tile, just a scrap with a familiar symbol, a spiral. You turn around and choose another road. Better safe than stabbed. That night, you sleep beneath the stars, wrapped in your cloak, boots still on. An owl hoots nearby. Your back aches. Your pack digs into your ribs. You haven't spoken more than 10 words aloud all day. But the message was delivered. The system still works. And for tonight, at least, you're still alive to tell the next lie. You wake up to the sound of hooves, not thundering, just the slow, uneven clop of someone who doesn't want to be noticed. That's your cue. You stay flat against the cold earth, breathing shallow, listening. One rider, light armor, horse limping slightly on the left front hoof. Merchant's son or courier, maybe. You let them pass. Moments like this, they're more common than you'd think. Being a medieval assassin isn't all sneaking into castles or throwing poison darts from balconies. A lot of it is waiting, watching, not getting trampled by rich kids on ponies. And after that horse is gone and the birds remember to sing again, your eyes stretch your aching knees and begin another long, sore walk. This time, your destination is one of the worst, a medieval city. Not the kind with dreamy towers and flower stalls. The kind with muddy alleys, leaking roofs, and air so thick with chimney so you start coughing before you even see the gate. You pass through unnoticed, part of a line of peasants, pilgrims, and farmers. You're dressed like a leather worker today. Your hands are stained with berry juice and soot to sell the illusion. Your pack holds a set of blunt tools and a few scraps of fake orders, in case anyone asks. Cities are complicated for people like you. On one hand, anonymity is easier here. More faces, more bustle, more shadows. On the other hand, there are guards at every corner, patrols watching for petty thieves, and suspicious neighbors who've been burned by one too many bad apples and now think everyone's a spy. Your contact is supposed to be inside a bathhouse near the meat market, because of course they are. Nothing says subtle espionage like passing secret documents next to a sweating tanner getting his monthly scrub. You head that way through twisting alleys, stepping around puddles you sincerely hope are just water. And that's when you hit the most dreaded medieval enemy of all, the city stench. It's everywhere. A thick, relentless blend of rotting fish, chamber pots, animal hides, and sweat. There's a reason so many perfumes were invented in this era, and it wasn't romance. You cover your nose with your sleeve and keep moving. Here's the thing, cities back then weren't designed for people like you. They were designed to keep you out. Watchmen roam in pairs. Bell towers give alarm. Town criers announce everything from tax changes to executions. You're an outsider, and cities feel it. Still, you know how to move. Stick to the sides of the street. Keep your shoulders loose, gaze unfocused. Appear tired, distracted, like someone too poor and too dull to be worth a second glance. That's the trick. You arrive at the bathhouse. It's small, smoky, and humid enough to wilt a cabbage. You spot your contact almost immediately. He's pretending to doze, neck deep in cloudy water. You slide into the basin next to him, grumbling about sore joints. He hands you a washcloth. Inside it, you find a sliver of parchment folded 3 times. Instructions, possibly a name. You nod once and slide away. You've got maybe an hour before your face is remembered by someone important. Maybe less. So you duck into the side alleys, twist between carts, and finally slip through a cracked door behind an abandoned bakery. It's a temporary safe house. Just one room with a cot, some stale bread, and a hole in the roof that drips when it rains. You've stayed in worse. You read the message. It's just 3 words. Midnight. Black Lantern. Historians still argue whether assassins had full-fledged guild halls hidden inside medieval cities, or if they operated entirely out of ad hoc hiding spots like this. Some fringe scholars point to suspicious tax records with maintenance fees for non-existent rooms. Others think that's romanticizing. Based on your experience, it's mostly leaky roofs and stolen furniture. You rest until nightfall, chewing old cheese and pacing silently to stay alert. And when the sun finally vanishes behind a grimy skyline, you slip into the streets again, heading toward the Black Lantern Tavern. This place is legendary among your kind. Not because it's grand, because it isn't. It's filthy. It leans to the left. The ale tastes like regret. But it has one crucial thing: discretion. Everyone here is either running from something or pretending they're not, which makes it perfect. You enter, blend, sit. Your handler joins you half an hour later, disguised as a spice merchant. She orders spiced wine, scratches her neck twice. The signal to confirm you're clean, no tails. You have a new name, she says without looking at you. And a new location. You leave before dawn. You don't argue. You never do. She slides a pouch across the table. Inside, a crude map, some coin, and a worn locket with a miniature inside. A target. A cover identity. Could be both. You'll find out. You sip your ale slowly. It tastes like it was strained through a boot, but you drink it anyway. Not because you enjoy it, because you can't afford to leave anything unfinished. Not in a place like this. You sleep in a loft above a cooper's shop that night, your new papers tucked beneath your tunic, your bag packed and ready. You stare at the ceiling beams, listening to the rats play tag in the walls, and wonder how long you'll last this time. Cities chew you up. They spit you out with new scars, a thinner purse, and that same low hum of paranoia that never quite fades. Every closed shutter could be a watcher. Every chimney sweep could be a scout. And that child selling apples might be the one trailing you tomorrow. Still, you'll come back. Because cities hold secrets, and secrets are the assassin's real currency. Just next time, you'll try to avoid the bathhouse. You're out of the city before dawn, stepping lightly over frostbitten grass, the taste of yesterday's terrible ale still clinging to your tongue. You got a map that looks like it was drawn by a drunk goat, and a name you're supposed to memorize: Jorn of Dunmere. Congratulations. You're now a textile apprentice with a suspiciously nice dagger and no idea how to weave anything but a lie. Your destination is Dunmere Abbey, nestled in a misty valley 4 days' walk to the east. Your assignment: something delicate. You're not there to kill, at least not yet. You're there to listen, to observe, and if necessary, make someone disappear without leaving a ripple. It's the kind of job that eats at your nerves more than your blade. Less action, more silence. The dangerous kind. Abbeys are strange territory for assassins. On one hand, they're full of monks, men who pray more than they speak and mostly want to be left alone. On the other hand, they're tied into a powerful web of medieval politics, land ownership, and knowledge hoarding. In other words, secrets. You make your way east through gently rolling hills, passing shepherds wrapped in wool and suspicion. At one hamlet, a boy asks why your boots are so well made. You laugh and say your master's rich. The boy looks skeptical. He's right to. At night, you sleep beneath hedgerows or in the corners of abandoned mills. Once, you pay a coin to an old woman who rents out her hayloft to travelers. She makes a thick stew that smells like garlic and sorrow. You eat every drop. One quirky tidbit you overhear at her table. Apparently, the abbey you're heading toward owns a relic, the preserved finger bone of Saint Elgith, who supposedly could speak to birds. Historians still argue whether Elgith ever existed, or if he was just a repurposed pagan legend wrapped in a new tunic. Either way, the monks believe, and belief is enough to build an economy around. You arrive at the abbey on a gray morning, your new identity worn like a second skin. You introduce yourself at the outer gate, tell a porter you're here to help with fabric repairs, and most importantly, hand him a letter with a wax seal. A very specific seal. It's a forgery, of course, but a good one. The kind that suggests nobility and makes people nod instead of ask questions. He lets you in, just like that. Inside, Dunmere is quiet. Not peaceful, exactly, more like the hush of a place where the walls listen. Monks glide past in woolen habits, heads bowed. There's a scriptorium, a garden, a dormitory, and a refectory that smells perpetually of cabbage. You're assigned a small cell with a straw mattress and a single candle stub. Your contact is here somewhere, hidden behind robes and prayers. You don't know their face or name, just that they'll leave you a sign. You wait. You sweep floors. You fake an interest in spindle thread. And you watch. The rhythm of monastic life is soothing if you let it be. Bells ring. Men chant. The world narrows into candlelight and scripture. But beneath that rhythm, you sense the tension. Whispers in Latin that pause when you pass. A locked door at the back of the library. A monk with ink-stained fingers who avoids your gaze. You start to follow him. Not obviously, just enough to chart his routine. He spends most of his time copying old texts, but twice, just after Vespers, he slips into the crypt. No one else goes there. And when he returns, he's always breathing heavier. 3 nights later, you find a mark. Scratched into the underside of your chamber door. Half moon, curled like a sickle. The symbol means observe only, which means someone knows you're watching, and they're watching you. You get more careful. You don't eat all your meals. You don't sleep all the way. You start burying your real papers under the stone behind her cot, wrapped in oilcloth and prayer. And slowly, you uncover the pieces. The monk with the ink-stained fingers? He's smuggling information. You glimpse the parchment he tucks into his robes. Lists of names, diagrams of tunnels, Latin phrases about corruptio anime, corruption of the soul. You think he might be a double agent. Or maybe something worse. Then, a twist. Someone else vanishes. Brother Alric, a quiet gardener. Gone overnight. No goodbye, no trace. The monks say he was transferred. You find his sandals behind the compost heap, still warm. You're not the only one playing a part here. One night, during a particularly stormy vigil, you find a slip of paper pressed into your candle holder. It reads simply, "Move before Sunday." No signature. Just urgency. You decide to leave that night. You sneak into the crypt, where the suspicious monk spends his evenings, and discover a staircase beneath a fake tomb. It leads to a locked chamber full of scrolls, vials, and a strange copper mask shaped like a lion's head. It's not an assassin's lair. It's worse. It's a heretic's den. You don't take anything. You don't need to. You've seen enough to know this place is about to fall apart. And when it does, you don't want to be holding the match. By dawn, you're gone, walking fast. Your identity shed like a snake's skin. Jorn of Dunmere vanishes from the world as quickly as he appeared. The abbey behind you sinks into the mist. Back on the road, your mind churns. You didn't kill anyone, but you still changed the game. Sometimes that's the sharper blade. The life of a medieval assassin isn't all dramatic deaths and daring escapes. Sometimes it's just this: infiltration, observation, escape. No applause. No headlines. Just the satisfaction of outsmarting people who thought they held the strings. And the best part, no one even knows you were there. You make it halfway to the coast before the mud wins. Your boots, once nearly elegant, are now thick with swamp gunk, and your left foot is definitely hosting some kind of blister rebellion. But at least you're out of Dunmere's reach, and more importantly, out of Dunmere's silence. You'd take crows cawing over monk chanting any day, especially now. The map you carry is folded into quarters and smells faintly of beeswax. It leads to a port town, unnamed because secrecy is charming that way, where a ship is supposed to be waiting. You're not told where the ship is going. You just know you're not staying here. Not in this country. Not after what you saw. The road to the coast winds through woodlands and sodden hills. Villages that the landscape like afterthoughts, many of them with more livestock than people. You pass a way station with a thatched roof and a sign swinging in the wind, the Weeping Goat. You don't stop. Instead, you shelter that night in the ruins of an old Roman watchtower. The walls are half collapsed, but the bones of the past hold firm enough to keep the rain out. You build no fire. Not out of skill, fire making's easy, but because fire means notice, and notice means stories, and stories mean death. Or worse, curiosity. You think back to the copper lion mask. You still don't know what it was for. Ceremony? Torture? Theater? Historians still argue whether artifacts like that were real tools of secret sects or later embellishments. You saw it with your own eyes, but even you aren't sure. In the morning, you trudge on. The land flattens, the trees thin, and the wind carries the smell of salt. The sea is near. When you finally reach the coast, it greets you not with grandeur, but with gray. The sky is slate. The tide sluggish. The town, little more than clustered shacks and a leaning bell tower, feels like it could be blown away by a strong sigh. Your contact waits at the dock, dressed like a fishmonger. He doesn't speak, just hands you a package and points toward a small cog ship with peeling red paint. You nod once and bored. Life at sea is wet and cramped and full of hardtack that tastes like the floor of a carpenter's workshop. Your fellow passengers are merchants and mercenaries, all nursing secrets and old wounds. You say little. You watch everything. The ship heads south along the coast, eventually veering into warmer waters. You're told you're bound for a place where the language changes, and so do the rules. Your instructions are inside the package, sealed, of course, with a thread soaked in honey and hardened with ash. Very dramatic. You open it only after 3 nights at sea. Inside a scroll and a ring. The scroll says, "You are now Elias Pharaoh, advisor to a minor court. You are to embed yourself within the entourage of Count Ryalt of Corsair's Bend. He is suspected of harboring dissenters. Gain his trust. Report weekly. Eliminate if necessary. No pressure." The ring is iron, inlaid with tiny symbols you recognize as the old cipher language, used by your kind to spot each other in plain sight. Wear it on your left index finger if you want to signal, "I'm active." On your right thumb if you want to say, "I'm being watched." It's elegant, subtle, and makes your hand look faintly noble, which is a bonus. Corsair's Bend turns out to be beautiful in the way ruins are weathered, dramatic, half forgotten by most maps. It clings to the edge of the sea like it's trying not to fall in. Cliffs to the west, vineyards to the east, and a crumbling fortress in the middle that has survived more sieges than anyone can remember. The Count's court is small but restless. He holds salons, debates heresy over wine, and hires foreign scholars for amusement. He fancies himself progressive, which in the medieval world means he owns 3 books and thinks bathing might be healthy. You blend in easily. Being a court advisor is actually your most comfortable role yet. You get real food, spiced and hot. You get a bed, clean clothes, and best of all, no one questions your presence. They assume you're a noble's distant cousin or some exiled academic. You let them. But being embedded is tricky. You have to play the long game. That means sitting through 4-hour poetry readings without yawning. It means nodding sagely at philosophical nonsense like, "The stars are merely the dreams of the sea." It means remembering everyone's names, even the dogs. One of those dogs, by the way, is named Sir Pickle. He's a greyhound who wears a tiny velvet cloak. That part's real. You listen. You observe. You gather whispers. And soon you learn that Count Ryalt is not just harboring dissenters, he's funding them. Smuggling coin through his vineyards, sending coded letters disguised as wine invoices. Clever. Dangerous. Sloppy. But here's the catch. He's not evil. In fact, he's idealistic. He believes the kingdom is corrupt, and maybe he's right. He wants to build a world where lords can't send children to die for land disputes. He's just doing it the wrong way, with the wrong people, and with your guild watching. You report your findings in ciphered letters, left beneath a loose tile in the stables. You receive no replies, just silence. That silence tells you everything. The Count is marked. You stall. You invent reasons why action isn't prudent yet. Too many unknowns, too many witnesses. But you know your time is short. One evening, as you watch the sun drip into the sea like blood into water, Count Ryle joins you on the terrace. He speaks of trust, of destiny, of choosing sides. He hands you a book, a real one, bound in leather, filled with diagrams in dense Latin. "It belonged to my sister," he says. "She believed in another path." You nod. You thank him. And later that night, in your chamber, you slide a small vial of blackthorn extract into your traveling pouch. Just in case. The hard truth about being a medieval assassin? Sometimes you have to kill someone you admire. And sometimes you don't. But either way, you sleep with a dagger beneath your pillow. Just in case Sir Pickle stops liking you. You lie awake that night, tracing the pattern of the dagger hilt with your thumb, wondering what you'll choose. Because that's what this moment has become, a choice. Not a command, not a reaction. Yours. Which feels weird, frankly. Assassins aren't paid to have moral crises. You're supposed to just handle things. The air in your room smells of salt and lavender. The sea murmurs beyond a window, and somewhere below, a drunk lute player is ruining a perfectly good song. You could kill Count Ryle tonight. Quick, painless. He'd never see it coming. You'd leave before dawn. Back to shadows, back to orders, back to safety. Or you could let this play out. Just watch. Learn more. Risk everything. It's ridiculous, really. You're hesitating over a man whose dog wears a cloak. But he's also the first person in a long while to treat you like more than a tool. The next morning, you act as if nothing's wrong. You attend a council discussion on irrigation. You nod while someone explains aqueducts using carrots. You taste a suspiciously bitter wine and make a note of it. Possibly poisoned. Possibly just a terrible vintage. The vineyard workers are tense. You've been here long enough to recognize when a court is holding its breath. Something's coming. You can feel it in the way the guards glance too often at the gates. In the way the Count's steward double-checks every parchment. Even Sir Pickle has stopped barking at seagulls. Ominous. A few nights later, you finally get your sign. A falcon arrives. Sleek, silent, with a tiny scroll tied to its leg. You're the one who unties it, pretending to marvel at the bird while your heart sinks. The message is brief. Asterisk decision overdue. Confirm completion within 3 days. Or we will asterisk. So now it's a countdown. You spend the first day walking the cliffs with the Count, listening to his dreams for a freer land. Try not to hear the ticking clock in your head. He speaks of alliances, of leveraging trade routes, of an uprising in the north that might tip the scales. You don't tell him his own men are selling his plans to your guild. That night, you test the poison. Just a drop on your dagger, touched to a rat you find in the storeroom. The rat twitches, squeaks, and dies in under 30 seconds. Reliable. On the second day, you slip away to meet with the steward. He's more than he seems. You suspected, but now he confirms it. He's also guild-trained. Retired. Watching you. Does he die, you ask. The steward frowns. That's not our call. That's yours. Typical. Assassins talk a lot about personal responsibility. Until the paperwork goes sideways. You spend the night not sleeping. And then it's the third day. Count Ryle throws a feast for the visiting emissary from Turnitch, a petty lord with garlic breath and a cape so long it trips over itself. The wine flows. The music limps along. The food is excellent, which almost makes the moral crisis worse. You sit beside the Count. Your dagger is strapped to your thigh. The vial of poison sits in your sleeve. You could end this with a single touch, but something makes you pause. It's the Count's toast. He raises his goblet and says, "To those who build peace from beneath silence, even if no one sees them." It's not a reference anyone else would notice. But you do. And in that moment, you realize something. He knows who you are. Maybe not your name, not your guild, but your role. He knows you've been watching him, judging him, deciding, and he's letting you. So you make your decision. You drink the wine. You eat the food. You laugh at the lute player's terrible ballad. And later that night, you bury the vial of poison in the garden beneath the olive tree. You're not killing him. Not today. You write your reply to the guild that night in cipher. Asterisk target not viable. Surveillance continues. We'll update in 2 weeks. Asterisk. It's a gamble. They might send someone else. They might eliminate you. But you bought time. And sometimes in your line of work, time is everything. That week, you discover something strange. A wine shipment misdirected to a monastery that doesn't exist. A cloaked figure entering the fortress tunnels at night. A map hidden in a book of psalms showing routes that bypass every toll gate in the region. Count Ryled isn't just funding rebels. He's preparing for war. And you're no longer sure which side you're on. There's an old assassin saying, truth is just the lie you tell last. You think about that as you sit on the parapet, watching the sun bleed over the water, wondering what happens next. And for once, you're not afraid of not knowing. Because you still have your dagger, still have your mask, still have Sir Pickle curled up at your feet, dreaming of something noble. And maybe, just maybe, you're not the villain of this story after all. The breeze off the sea turns cold as autumn deepens, and so does the sense that something's unraveling. You feel it in the corridors, servants walking faster, guards staying sober. Conversations drop off when you enter a room, which is funny, considering how good you used to be at going unnoticed. But now they see you, not for who you are, but for the power you might represent. That's worse somehow. You still haven't heard back from the guild. No falcon. No. Not even a conveniently dropped whisper in a tavern. And the longer the silence stretches, the more dangerous it becomes. You know how this game is played. No reply is in peace. It's the click of a crossbow string tightening in the dark. So you make adjustments. You move your sleeping place. You swap rings on different fingers each day, signal confusion to any operatives watching. Maybe make them hesitate. Maybe make them wonder if you're still loyal. The thing is, you're not sure yourself. At court, Count Ryle grows bolder. He's begun giving speeches to visiting merchants, threading politics into trade talk, hinting at a coalition of nobles willing to challenge the crown. He's still careful, but the edge is fraying. You spend an afternoon watching him read over a scroll of grain tariffs, his brow furrowed, lips murmuring calculations. It's mundane, but you realize he believes this will help people. He genuinely thinks fairer trade will save lives. Meanwhile, you're trying to figure out if the guard captain sharpened his sword in your direction a little too pointedly. One night, you find a dead raven on your windowsill. Not a message, just dead. You check for symbols, wax threads, anything. Nothing. Just a raven, still warm, like it dropped mid-flight. You wrap it in a cloth and bury it in the garden near the poison vial you never used. You tell no one. But that's the thing about your guild. They don't need to send a message to remind you they're watching. The next day, the steward corners you. You are beginning to think he'd vanished into his ledger pages. You know they won't wait forever, he says quietly, straightening scrolls that don't need straightening. I bought time, you say. They'll take it back with interest. You both know what that means. If the guild sends someone else, they won't just eliminate Ryled. They'll tie off the whole thread. Anyone who's seen too much. Anyone who hesitated. That includes you. There's an old trick your kind uses, the mirror escape. You create a fake version of yourself, identity, papers, behavior patterns. Then you start letting people see that version. Just enough to draw attention. And then you kill it. Not literally. Just disappear it. Let them believe the mirror image is dead. And you become someone new. It takes planning. You start subtly, complaining about headaches, staying in during dinners, leaving your cloak in odd places. Dropped ring. A private conversation you know the guards will overhear, suggesting you're considering leaving court. It builds the illusion. Person fraying. A liability. Someone the guild might handle swiftly. But here's the real play. You want them to believe they've already handled it. Because if they think you're dead or broken, they might leave the rest of this place alone. For now, historians still argue whether medieval intelligence agents actually staged their own deaths this way. Some say it's folklore, exaggerated in bard songs and cloaked in melodrama. But others point to vanished figures, closed dossiers, names crossed out in ink far too neatly. You're gambling on it being real and workable. You also begin training someone to take your place. Quietly, discreetly. The court librarian of all people. She's sharp, suspiciously nimble, and always manages to be nearby when things happen. You test her once by dropping a ciphered note behind a statue. She hands it to you the next day, unopened, but with the corner folded precisely twice. The guild's silent signal for "I know what this is." You ask her, "You ever think about doing something riskier?" She says, "All the time." So you begin passing her pieces. Language, observation, codes. Not everything. Not yet. But enough that if something happens to you, someone might keep the thread alive. On the fifth night of this delicate game, you fake your own poisoning. Not dramatic. Not fatal. Just enough to cause panic, clear the court, and give the impression that someone acted. You even write a death confession. Nonsense, of course, but elegant nonsense. The steward helps you disappear. Because of course he does. That night, your body is burned at sea. Closed pyre. Just ashes. As requested by your final wish. The court mourns for a day. Then the count returns to plotting. You're under the floorboards. Literally. Hidden in an old servant's tunnel that runs behind the west wing, breathing through a crack in the stone, eating dry lentils, and listening to the world pretend you're gone. The thing is, it works. You're alive. The guild believes you're handled. The count is safe. For now. And the librarian leaves a note under your old mattress. Asterisk, we are still being watched. But they think they're alone. Asterisk. It's the first time you've smiled in weeks. Because she gets it. This isn't about ending a mission. It's about bending it. Changing the rules from underneath. Of course, it can't last forever. Nothing does. But for now, the wind off the sea carries nothing but salt. And you, exhausted, hidden, reborn, fall asleep to the sound of silence. The kind you've chosen. You wake up to rats fighting over a breadcrumb you didn't mean to drop. One of them wins, scurries off into the wall, and the other stares at you like it wants vengeance. Life underground has a way of making you philosophical, like wondering if that rat is some kind of metaphor. It's been 4 days since your death. You haven't seen the sun. Your hair smells like old wood. Your limbs ache from the uneven stone floor, and you're beginning to resent lentils as a concept. Still, you're alive. The count is alive. And the guild hasn't sent a cleaner. Yet, your days are now spent listening. To footsteps above. To gossip that leaks through walls. The steward drops updates through a loose brick. Short notes, scribbled reports. And occasionally, dried fruit. A true friend. Today, the note says, asterisk, they're asking questions in the city. 2 disappearances. Asterisk. Disappearances? You run through the possibilities. Careers? Informants? Or someone from the guild who didn't buy your dramatic exit. It wouldn't be the first time. Historians still argue whether medieval spy networks were this intricate, that multiple agents shadowed each other, tangled in webs of partial truths and lethal hunches. But you've seen enough to know the truth. They were. Not elegant, but effective. Sometimes two assassins would end up hunting the same mark, unaware they were being watched in return. So maybe the real question isn't, did they send someone? It's how many did they send? You begin drawing maps on the wall in charcoal. Pass through the fortress. Escape routes. Observation points. Places where someone could hide. You draw 2 extra figures, one for the missing person from the city, and one for whoever made them vanish. You also sketch the Count's movements, what you can overhear, speeches, military drills, secret meetings with someone called Lady Fern. You assume it's an alias. Sounds like a forest spirit who trades tax reform advice for acorns. One night, you hear voices closer than they should be. Beneath the floor. Whispers. Soft scraping. Someone else is using the tunnels. You hold your breath, dagger in hand, until they pass. You count 3 sets of footsteps. You never learn who they were. But the next morning, the Count is missing. The court panics. Everyone pretends not to panic, which just makes it louder. You slip through the tunnel system until you reach a peephole near the war room. The steward is there, calm as ever. So is Lady Fern in a green hood. And the librarian, your reluctant apprentice, wearing a ring you recognize. One of yours. A signal. We believe Count Ryle was taken at sea, Lady Fern says. He never reached the trade vessel, but you don't believe that for a second. No body, no wreckage, no blood, which means one of 3 things. He escaped, he was captured, or he's faking his own disappearance. Honestly, that last one would be deliciously ironic. You retreat to your tunnel, and by candlelight, you draft a new plan. If the Count did fake his escape, he'll have left breadcrumbs for someone. Probably you. He trusted you before he even admitted it. He knew you were watching. So you retrace old paths. Search rooms you haven't stepped into in weeks. And in the cracked spine of a forgotten ledger, you find it. A coded letter. Nothing flashy. Just a line. Asterisk, where the tide runs backward. Meet the ghost of the coast. Asterisk. Cryptic? Yes. Poetic? Unfortunately. But you know the reference. The ghost of the coast is a shipwreck wedged into the rocks east of the fortress. The tide never fully pulls away from it. And when it rains, the sea seems to flow uphill around it, a strange quirk of the shoreline. So now you have a destination. You slip out that night, through the garden, through the old storm drains. You pass the olive tree, the poison vial still buried beneath it. A nice reminder of all the decisions you didn't make. The cliffs are brutal in the moonlight. Wind slaps your face. The sea crashes below, louder than memory. But there it is, the ghost. A cracked ship, half submerged, hollowed like a ribcage. Inside, you find the Count. Alive, alone, wearing what you can only describe as suspiciously casual noble beachwear. You found it, he says, not surprised. You left a trail, you say. He nods. I had to disappear. Temporarily. Lady Fern is more than she appears. She needed me gone. Why? She's forming something. A council of shadowed voices. People who see how broken things are. She thinks I could be their first visible thread. You sit across from him, the creaking wood beneath you smelling of salt and rot. You couldn't tell me. If I had, you'd have been compromised. This way, if someone broke you, you could claim ignorance. That's generous, you mutter. No, he says softly. It's dangerous, but necessary. He hands you a rolled parchment. It's not sealed, just tied. Inside names, locations, code phrases. A network. People like you and unlike you. Scholars. Ex-assassins. A brewer from Darent who apparently poisons tax records instead of people. You want me to run this? You ask stunned. No. I want you to test it. Shake it. Break it if it fails. Lovely job description. He grins. You leave him at the wreck because that's the story for now. The Count is dead, or lost, or something. You return through the tunnels, wait for dawn, then appear at the edge of the garden in full view of two very startled guards. Survived the poisoning, you say with a faint cough. Had to crawl through a wine barrel to flush it out. Do they believe you? Mostly. You tell the steward a version of the truth. Not all. Enough. The librarian hands you a scroll later that day. Blank on the outside. Inside, one line. Asterisk. Do you trust her yet? Asterisk. You don't reply, but you tuck it into your boot. Because something is coming. Not just politics. A reckoning. And you'll need all the shadows you can find to face it. You no longer eat in the Great Hall. Too visible. Too many eyes. Too many forks clinking too rhythmically for your liking. Instead, you've taken to slipping into the armory kitchen after dark, when the hearth is cooling and the day's stew is little more than a thick crust in the bottom of the pot. No one asks why. They've already decided you're touched, maybe a little haunted. That suits you just fine. The librarian, now codenamed Sable, joins you one night with an apple and a coded message wrapped in waxed linen. She sits without asking, rolls the fruit your way, and says, "We got a problem." Or a very well-disguised opportunity. You open the linen and squint at the ink. 4 symbols. Not in any cipher you recognize. This come through the tunnel? No, she says. It was left in the poetry section. Hidden in a copy of Frogs of the Eternal Fins. Nobody reads that book. You shake your head. We are not letting frogs become our new dead drop protocol. I didn't say it was a good system. She stands and leaves, not waiting for your next question. That's how it is with her now. You both know there's trust, but the edges are still sharp. You spend the next 2 days decoding the message. It's in a pre-conquest dialect used by a defunct scribal order, people who supposedly cataloged whispers, not just books. The message, when unraveled, is painfully simple. Asterisk, the guild knows the Count is alive. They are coming. Don't die loudly. Asterisk. Not exactly a bedtime story. You don't panic. You've faced worse. But you do recheck every trap in the tunnels. Rear out escape pass. Bury a second dagger in the latrine wall, just in case you ever need to fight your way out while buttoning trousers. You think ahead. Historians still argue whether the medieval guilds were truly omnipresent. Some say they were loose affiliations of like-minded opportunists. Others claim a deeply structured hierarchy with coded loyalties and overlapping branches. You, having worked inside their shadows, know it's both. And now they've chosen to act. The first sign comes quietly. A new monk appears at the chapel, hooded, soft-spoken, seemingly reverent. Too reverent. You spot him once walking past the altar and not making the sign of the cross. Instead, he touches 2 fingers to his ribs, an old guild signal for begin the watch. You don't confront him. You let him think you haven't noticed. Instead, you shadow him. You watch him tuck folded notes under the organ bench, speak softly to a priest who no longer coughs like he used to. The guild has infiltrated the one place left untouched by court scheming, faith. You relay all this to the steward in the war room. They're preparing for a play, you say. He doesn't blink. So are we. He hands you a list, 10 names. Some familiar, some not. Each is a figure in the Count's slowly forming shadow alliance. Some loyal, some wavering. Your task? Smoke out the moles. Quietly. You don't like the word quietly anymore. It never means what it used to. The librarian, Sable, suggests a misdirection. You stage a secret council meeting in the old observatory tower, publicly. Loud whispers, slipped keys, a few visible preparations. Everything pointing to something big. And then, at the same hour, you hold the real meeting in the wine cellar 2 floors below. It works. Half the people you suspect go to the tower, cloaked in fake secrecy. They find nothing. 3 days later, one of them vanishes. No body, just blood on the stairwell. A smear, not a pool. The kind of cleanup the guild does when they want you to notice. Message received. You change tactics. Instead of rooting them out, you feed them. Bad intel, fake plans, phantom alliances. The monk receives a note about a supposed meeting with smugglers from the Northern Isles. That night, you and Sable watch from a distance as he approaches the dock and finds nothing but a dead fish nailed to the mast. Another signal, you've been had. He doesn't return to the chapel. A week passes. The tension becomes a smell in the walls, smoke, steel, and fierce sweat. But no further deaths. Just silence. Measured, unnatural silence. And then you receive a letter. No messenger. No footprint. Just there on your bed. Your real bed this time, not the tunnel mat. It reads, asterisk, you had one job. You failed. Exit now. Asterisk. Signed only with a red slash. You sit with a note for a long time. Not because you're afraid, but because it confirms something you hoped wasn't true. The guild is done pretending. They think you've chosen your side. They're right. So you write your own note. Plain one. No cipher. Just 7 words. Asterisk. Tell Ryle the noose is tightening. Asterisk. You hand it to Sable. Get it to the shipwreck. Don't speak. She vanishes into the night like she was trained for this. Maybe she was. You spend the rest of the evening sealing passageways, moving caches, and burning old disguises. The you that once served the guild is dead. Not buried, but unneeded. You sleep an hour, maybe 2. You dream of the rat again. The one that lost. Only this time it has your face. You wake with a start. There's a shadow at your door. Not moving. Just watching. And you realize they're inside now. The next move has to count. The shadow at your door doesn't knock. It simply waits. Like fog pressing against glass, too patient to be wind, too solid to be imagined. You stay still in your cot, one hand under the pillow where the dagger waits. Your breath slows. If you're lucky, it's just fear playing tricks. If not, then the door creaks open. Not fast, not loud, just enough to let the hall's lantern light spill in. A soft silhouette leans in a hood, a shoulder, a slight tilt of the head, as if whoever stands there already knows you're awake. You left the window open, the voice says. A whisper. It's the steward. You release your grip on the dagger. Barely. I needed air, you reply. He slips inside, closes the door, and leans against it. His eyes flicker to the dagger, then back to you. You got about 2 hours. Until what? Until the chapel burns. You sit up. They're making it look like an accident, he continues. A votive candle tipped over. The monk you shadowed, he'll be found dead inside. They'll say he fell asleep, except he's already dead. You mutter. Exactly. This is how guild messages work. Fire for closure. Fire for denial. Burn the path behind the spy, and no one follows. Why tell me, you ask? Because the next building might be your room. And I'd prefer you weren't in it. He drops a pouch on the floor. Coins, judging by the dull clink. I need you out of the fortress, he says. Tonight. Won't that look like I'm fleeing? It will. And we'll use that. Oh, the old fake defection routine. Hasn't failed you. Well, not every time. Historians still argue whether double-crossing guild members were truly as common as old ballads suggest. Some believe betrayal was rare and punished brutally. Others think it was almost a rite of passage. What's less debated is this. Once the guild marked you, death was the minimum consequence. Living was optional. You pack in silence. Just the essentials: 2 knives, some map etched with escape routes, 1 red ribbon you've kept since childhood, don't ask, and a flask of honeyed root tea. That last one's for the nurse. The plan is simple: leave through the gate during the night patrol's changeover. Let a witness see you. Let 2 guards not stop you. Appear rushed but not panicked. Just enough breadcrumbs to make the story believable. You execute it perfectly, down to the timed clatter of boots in the courtyard and the faint snarl you fake when a stable hand blocks your path. By sunrise, you're on a cart full of turnips heading north. The road is muddy, loud, and smells aggressively of tubers, but it's safer than traveling on foot. You pass soldiers, merchants, even a traveling bard who sings a 6-verse dirge about the knight who kissed a donkey. You hum it under your breath for hours. It's catchy, regrettably so. At dusk, you arrive at the village of Sin's Hollow, a forgettable smear of thatch roofs, one overworked inn, and a chapel barely standing on its own bricks. You get a room under the name Myra Flint. You pay in coin but tip with information, overheard gossip about a potential raid on the eastern toll roads. It's all fake, of course, but the innkeeper eats it up like boiled trout. Inside your room, you set to work. Because this isn't an escape. This is the beginning of the counterplay. You don't wait for the guild to strike again. You hunt them first. It starts with a merchant in the corner booth. Too polite, too clean, no road dust on his cuffs. You watch him trade coins with a courier who never actually delivers anything. 2 days later, you follow him after dark. He heads to a barn behind the chapel. Inside, a ledger, ink still wet, listing names and dates. One of them is yours. So you leave your own note tucked into his boot. Asterisk 3 steps behind. 1 step ahead. Asterisk. He's gone the next morning. But the ledger remains, and with it, more names. You recognize one, an apothecary in Glenmere. Last you heard, she sold herbal teas with suspiciously effective side effects. You travel there by night ferry, keeping low, cloaked in old clothes that smell like river slime. You think the disguise is solid, until a boy offers you a dead fish in trade for your sorcerer's boots. You make it to Glenmere by morning. The apothecary, tall, silver-haired, always seems to know what you want before you say it, greets you with a nod. You're the one from the list, she says. And you're not afraid. I'm too old for fear. Also, I laced the tea. You freeze. She laughs. With valerian. You'll sleep well tonight. That's all. You like her immediately. She's part of it, Ryalt's ghost network. The quiet alliance forming beneath the cities, behind the wars, beyond the reach of guild or throne. She gives you a parchment sealed with wax shaped like a sparrow. Take this to the candlemaker in Derek's Rise, she says. Don't look at it. Don't open it. You don't. You arrive 3 days later, boots soaked, fingers blistered from holding onto the reins during a storm that seems personally offended by your existence. The candlemaker is blind in one eye, but she reads the wax seal by touch. Haven't seen this since the Velvet Conspiracy, she mutters. Follow me. She takes you behind shop, through a trapdoor that smells of wax and ghosts. And there, in a tiny room lit by a single blue flame, is someone you never expected. Lady Fern. Not cloaked. Not pretending. She smiles like she's waited years. I see you've been busy. You nod. So have you. She gestures to a wall covered in maps, strings, pins. It looks like conspiracy exploded in here. This, she says, is where we stop running. From now on, we make them look over their shoulders. You exhale, the tension in your spine finally beginning to uncoil. You in? She asks. You nod once. And from the look in her eyes, you realize something. This is no longer about survival. This is war. The wax still lingers in your nostrils. Not the honeyed kind from temple rituals or scented sticks meant to woo lovers. No, this is raw tallow and soot. Strategy wax. Warwax. The kind that melts under pressure, just like people tend to when the knives come out. Lady Fern is talking. Her voice smooth, unhurried, but underlined with a simmer you hadn't heard back when she was pretending to be a courtly observer with no sharp opinions. Now she points at red threads stretched across maps like spider silk. Each one a connection, each pin a name. This network stretches to every major seat, she says. They think they've got us scattered and weak, but we've been mapping them the whole time. You lean closer. There's one pin right where the fortress sits, deep inland, tucked in its own mountain cradle. Next to it, a symbol you haven't seen in a decade, a double circle drawn in red ink. The guild's next convergence, Fern says. 7 days from now. Right under your old bedroom, if I had to guess. You raise a brow. So they're throwing a party on top of my ghost. She smirks. More of a council. Possibly a bloodletting. Hard to say. That mark means high probability of sacrifice, but our source is artistically dramatic. You can't help it, you snort. Don't worry, I'll wear my red tunic. It's gallows humor, but it works. You feel the knots in your chest loosen just enough to let breath through. Still, it's not lost on you how small this team is. Fern, the one-eyed candle maker, a weaver who reportedly strangles people with her own thread, though she also makes a decent cherry pie. And you who failed to kill a count, failed to stay loyal, and now are somehow one of the few people qualified to unmake the organization that trained you. Historians still argue whether medieval intelligence networks were truly so interconnected. Many believe espionage was regional, chaotic, with more knife fights than strategy, but others, pointing to recovered codices and suspiciously coordinated assassinations across distant kingdoms, insist there's a web, a dangerous, intentional, whisper-fed web. You've walked it. You've bled on it. And now you're tearing it down strand by strand. Fern lays out the plan in layers. Layer 1, infiltration. You'll return to the fortress under disguise. Not through the gates, but through the aquifer passage beneath the western bluff. You used it once to escape after botching a poisoning and nearly dying in a goose pen. You remember it vividly. Damn, tight. Home to unusually aggressive bats. Layer 2, confirmation. Inside the fortress, you'll locate the convergence chamber, likely beneath the archive, possibly inside the old reliquary vault, where nobody ever visits because the relics are rumored to bite. Seriously. A monk lost a toe in 1372. Layer 3, sabotage. You won't kill them. Not directly. That would make you predictable. Instead, you'll seed doubt, misdirect, make the guild question its own members. Then, just as confusion blooms, Fern's external allies will strike from 3 fronts. It'll feel like betrayal from within, she says, but only because you'll have twisted the knife in just the right direction. You raise your hand. So, quick question. What if they just stab me first? Oh, she says, they will. You wait. She adds, that's what the poison's for. Oh, of course. She hands you a small vial glass so thin it's practically breath. Slip it into the communion wine they're using for their oath ceremony. They've been borrowing religious rites lately. Theatrics. But it'll work. You pocket it. Carefully. The journey back to the fortress begins at dusk. You travel alone, moving in slow arcs, never a straight line. You pass through 2 markets, 3 fake identities, and one oddly spiritual conversation with a goat herder who insists the stars are jealous of human teeth. You don't ask for clarification. You don't need that in your dreams. The aquifer entrance is exactly where you remember it, beneath the western bluff, behind a rock shaped like a man holding his breath. You crawl through moss into a tunnel so narrow you have to remove your cloak and twist sideways. Water drips with theatrical rhythm. You're wet within minutes, freezing soon after. The bats are still there, still angry. One of them takes a chunk of your ear as you curse under your breath and whisper a silent apology to nature. When you emerge in the cistern chamber, you find a torch already burning. Too bright. You freeze. Then a voice behind you. You're late. It's Sable. She's changed. Leaner, faster, wearing black leather gloves with fingertips removed. Her eyes scan you like a puzzle she once solved and now only half remembers. Ryle thought you'd be earlier, she says. He's still waiting by the chapel crypt. Doesn't like sitting still. I came the scenic way, you reply. Together, you move through tunnels like ghosts rehearsing an old haunt. The fortress feels different now. Not just old or wrong. The walls breathe too loud. The corridors echo footsteps you didn't make. You find Ryle kneeling beside a candlelit vault door. He looks up, smirks. So, he says, you brought the poison. You nod. And a grudge. Good. You'll need both. Inside the crypt, things fall into place. Maps unfurled. Hidden caches. Backup exits. Even a grappling hook rigged to the belfry tower. A last resort, obviously. You hate grappling hooks. They never land right. Then comes the hard part. You dress as a brother confessor. A role usually reserved for final rites or uncomfortable truth-seeking sessions. The robe itches and smells like dust and holy lies. You slip into the guild's convergence just as they begin the binding ceremony. It's surreal. Torches flicker along stone walls. Hooded figures chant in an ancient tongue you haven't heard since training. There's incense, an oath scroll, and yes, the wine. You approach the altar. One wrong move and it's over. You pour the vial into the goblet. No one notices. As the wine is passed, you back away. Slowly, your breath measured. Every instinct screams to run. But you wait. The first one to sip is the new guildmaster, a wiry man with hands that tremble just a little too much for someone in charge of a deadly network. His lips stain red. Then the second. The third. By the fifth, the murmurs begin. Someone coughs. Another fumbles their oath. Then one turns on the other. You hesitated, she snaps. I saw you meet with the Outlanders, he fires back. You don't look back. Well, okay, you glance back. Once. Just a peek over the edge of the tower, where chaos is beginning to froth like spoiled milk. Down there, hooded figures run through corridors with drawn blades and broken trust. The wine did its work, not by killing them outright, but by sharpening suspicion, stoking long-buried rivalries, and loosening tongues that never should have spoken in the first place. You and Fern slip down the rear scaffolding. Ryle lingers a moment longer, just long enough to light a small bundle of tarred rope with a slow, grinning nod. The smoke curls up into the night like a blessing from some petty god of vengeance. And then the chapel explodes. Not entirely, just the old bell tower. Enough to signal that this chapter of the guild's history is cracked wide open. The bell lands somewhere in the orchard with an unceremonious thud, taking a few rebellious apples with it. You don't stop to admire the carnage. You're already running. Through the northern pass, feet pounding mud. Fern leads now. She knows the terrain, the hideouts, the signals scratched onto old trees by friendlier rebels. Your lungs burn, but your legs don't stop. By dawn, you reach an abandoned mill. Inside, Fern pulls back her hood. We buy ourselves a week. Maybe two. But they'll regroup. You nod. So we burn the regrouping too. She smiles faintly. Exactly. Here's the thing about collapsing a guild built on secrets. It doesn't die when you stab its leaders. It dies when no one trusts the shadows anymore. That's what you're doing. Unthreading the very fabric of fear. You stay in the mill just long enough to sleep, though sleep is generous. It's more like closing one eye at a time while cradling a dagger. Still, the floorboards creak less than expected, and a mouse curls up near your foot like it respects your profession. The next morning, you find yourself staring at a list fern left on the table. Names. Old ones. Some you recognize. Some who taught you how to blend in, how to kill, how to disappear. She's marked them in red. These are the last loyalists, she says. They'll try to hold the guild together. And we're paying them a visit. We're offering them a choice. Either burn their oaths or be buried with them. Dramatic, but accurate. Your first target is Grand Nick, the scribe master who once beat a recruit into unconsciousness for misfiling a poison recipe. He's holed up in a monastery that pretends not to know what he is. The journey takes 4 days. You pose as a pilgrim, hooded, barefoot, and constantly muttering prayers just loud enough to seem holy but vague enough not to invite real theological discussion. The monastery smells like incense, sweat, and boiled lentils. Grand Nick is there, copying a manuscript about divine mercy with the same expression he wore while crafting interrogation manuals. You slide into the seat beside him and whisper, "I remember the bee venom lesson." He doesn't flinch, just sighs. So it's come to this. You offer him the choice. Burn the ledger he's hiding in his cell, the one full of contact routes, training schedules, and half-remembered passwords, or wait for the others to find him. He chooses fire, and as he watches the pages curl into black petals, he says, "They'll never forgive you." "Then I guess I'm free," you reply. Historians still argue whether guild affections like these were real or apocryphal. Some insist no one ever truly left the organization alive. Others claim underground alliances routinely turn the tide in regional wars by flipping key agents. What's certain is that when fear loses its edge, power begins to slip. Over the next 2 weeks, you and Fern move like a storm in reverse, quiet, cold, calculated. You find 5 more loyalists. 3 burn their oaths. 1 tries to kill you badly, and the 5th simply walks into the sea after muttering, "It was never supposed to last this long." You're not sure whether to respect that or worry deeply. By the time you return to the Weaver's safe house, the air has changed. Not just metaphorically, there's actual lavender in the hearth. The Weaver has upgraded. She hands you a bundle wrapped in linen. Inside a ring. "That belonged to the original founder," she says. "Before the guild turned dark. Before they traded ideals for influence. The ring is plain, silver, slightly worn, with a design that might be wings or flames or both. You slip it on. "Do I get superpowers now?" you ask. "No," she replies. "Just expectations." Great. That night, as you sit beside the fire, Fern reads a letter aloud. It's from one of your former trainers, the one who taught you how to move silently in armor. Somehow she'd survived exile and was now working as a smith in a southern village. The letter ends with, "Asterisk, if you're reading this, you're doing what we never had the courage to do. Just don't lose yourself in the rubble, asterisk." You stare into the fire a long time after that, because rubble is all you've ever known. Shattered oaths, crumbling towers, buried truths. But here, in this room with former enemies and suspicious pies, something new is forming. Not a guild, not a rebellion. Something quieter, like trust. You're not naive. You know the danger isn't gone. The guild will regrow in some form. Like mold, or rats, or taxes. But for the first time, they won't control the narrative. You will. You fall asleep that night without your dagger under the pillow. The mouse curls up again. You name him Knife, just in case. You wake up with Knife, the mouse balanced on your collarbone, and sunlight bleeding through the slats and the shutters like it's trying not to disturb anyone. For a moment, everything feels soft. Not safe, not peaceful, but softer than the world you're used to. Fern's already up. You hear her downstairs, arguing with the Weaver about fabric thickness, which apparently matters greatly when you're designing portable signal flags for a network of ex-assassins who communicate via laundry lines. You never thought you'd witness espionage done in knits and pearls, but here we are. Downstairs, the mood is practical. Not paranoid, not triumphant, just the calm hum of people who know they're still breathing because they were slightly more clever than the people chasing them. There's a map on the table again. This one has fewer pins. You've broken the central chain, Fern says, not looking up. Now it's about cleaning up the loose ones. The ones who think they're kings now that the court's empty. You eye the largest dot far to the west, marked with an X. Let me guess. That one still thinks he's in charge. She nods. Lord Viral. Self-appointed. Claimed dominion over the old guild network. Started calling himself the Flame Regent. Wears a crown made of bent knives. You blink. Okay, I'm sorry, what? Bent knives, she says, flipping over a parchment with a sketch that looks like someone glued spoons to their head and declared war on common sense. Also started issuing his own currency, with his face on it. And a hawk. Let me guess, there are no hawks in that region. Correct. Just aggressive pigeons. Yusa. Great. A delusional megalomaniac with a flair for metal hats. Classic endgame boss. She chuckles. He's worse than he sounds. So that's your next target. Not for elimination, though let's be honest, no one would miss him, but for exposure. Your goal now is less about blades and more about undermining myths. Because the guild, at its rotten core, survived on image, fear, legend, and Lord Viral, he's a leftover whisperer made flesh. The journey west takes 10 days. You travel as a bard this time. Loot on your back, soft boots on your feet, a collection of tavern songs filled with thinly veiled references to assassin stupidity. It's a weird disguise, more performative than you'd like, but it gets you close. Viral's territory is well guarded. Not by professionals, by sycophants. These are the worst kind of soldiers. Overconfident amateurs in matching cloaks, eager to impress a man who once ordered his tailor hanged for misaligning a seam. You slip into the castle during a festival of the Blade Moon, which is mostly just a lot of candlelight over seasoned stew and people waving cutlery while shouting oaths they barely understand. The irony, of course, is that half of these people are descended from actual assassins who would have slit your throat for shouting anything during a mission. Inside the keep, you find Viral in his so-called Hall of Echoes. It's not as dramatic as it sounds. Just a long room lined with polished shields, meant to reflect sound and make him seem more important when he speaks. You slip a scrap of paper into his pocket while he's delivering a speech about destiny. You know, he'll find it later. You know what it says? Asterisk, not all shadows serve you. Some are watching, asterisk. Then you vanish. Well, not vanish. You duck into the kitchens and exit through the dumbwaiter while a cook yells at a teen for burning the pigeon stew. 3 days later, Viral's top enforcer publicly defects. 2 days after that, his treasury clerk vanishes with all the silver. By the end of the week, someone steals the knife crown and replaces it with a wreath of turnips. You didn't kill him. You didn't even lay a hand on him. You just let the myth collapse under its own weight. Turns out, when you take away the fear, all that's left is a tired man in a shiny hat and a lot of unpaid guards. Historians still argue whether figures like Lord Viral ever existed. Some claim he was an exaggeration of multiple minor warlords. Others believe he was real, but never as grand as the stories suggest. Ironically, that's kind of the point. The guild thrived on exaggeration. It was a monster made of rumor. Back at the weaver's house, you hang up your loot. Knife the mouse is curled in a pouch of dried rose petals like he owns the place. Fern meets you on the porch with a letter. It's from the Eastern Watch, she says. They've officially declared the guild defunct, disbanded. No central command. No unified contracts. They're calling it the Quiet Collapse. You laugh. Sounds like a band name. I thought so too. There's a celebration that night. Not a loud one. Just bread, soup, some mead. A few survivors sit around the fire and tell stories they've never shared. About the bad missions, the close calls, the ones they didn't walk away from quite whole. You tell your own too. About the first person you ever followed. How you lost them because you sneezed at the worst possible moment. How they turn around, looked you in the eye, and said, "Bless you," before vanishing into a crowd. No mission ever made you sweat harder than that one. You laugh until you cry a little. No one says anything about it. And then, just before you go to sleep, Fern hands you a sealed scroll. On it, a crest you haven't seen in years. "The royal court," she says softly. "They want to meet with the person who unmade the guild." You groan. "Are they going to knight me?" "I hope not," she says. "You'd make a terrible knight. I'd stab the horse. You'd lecture the horse first." She's not wrong. The scroll hums in your palm like it knows you'll open it eventually. But not tonight. Tonight you rest. You've earned it. And Knife agrees, settling on your chest like a warm, judgmental pebble. You wake up with Knife still asleep on your chest, his tiny paws curled like he's hugging some invisible dream crumb. The letter from the royal court lies unopened on the side table, heavy with the kind of expectation that makes your old instincts twitch. Meetings with royalty rarely end in naps and tea. You stretch slowly, listening to the early morning creak of the safe house. Someone downstairs is baking. Probably the weaver. She's been on a rye bread kick lately. You're not sure if it's an emotional support carbohydrate or part of her plan to smuggle coded messages via oddly shaped loaves. You finally open the scroll. The message is brief, stiff, and full of the royal seal's self-importance. You are formally requested to attend a confidential audience with the Crown to discuss security restructuring in the wake of the recent organizational dismantling. Attendance is not optional. There's a map attached, detailing a discreet path to a keep near the capital, avoiding major roads, of course, because heaven forbid anyone in power travels like a normal human. You close the scroll and sigh. "So they want to meet the monster slayer," you mutter. Fern appears in the doorway, biting into a hunk of rye. "Want company? Would it even matter if I said no?" "No." So you both go. The journey is quiet, but not in a bad way. The air feels lighter somehow, like all that tension you used to carry has finally remembered how to float. You pass villages that once paid tribute to the guild. Now the coin stays in their markets. You notice open windows, unattended livestock, and children playing in daylight, tiny clues that the shadows are no longer watching quite so closely. When you arrive at the keep, you're not led through the main gate. Of course not. You're guided around the back, down a spiral staircase, and through a hallway so narrow you could pick your teeth with its corners. Eventually, you're shown into a round chamber with no windows and exactly one chair in the center. This is definitely a trap. You sit anyway. A panel slides open in the wall. Behind it, a woman in royal blue, not quite a queen, not quite a servant, somewhere in between. She wears the kind of expression that says she signed too many documents and trusted far too few people. "You unmade the guild," she says without preamble. "Technically, I helped it rot faster." She doesn't smile. Same result. She circles slowly. "Do you know how many officials died over the years because of shadows? How many treaties were unraveled? How much coin was siphoned from royal coffers to feed that machine?" You say nothing. Not out of guilt, just waiting to see where this is going. "We want to make sure it doesn't rise again," she continues. "And we believe the best way to do that is to build something new. A system. Official. Transparent. With oversight." You blink. "You want to legalize espionage?" "No," she says. "We want to professionalize it." Of course. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the first spark of modern intelligence agencies. Some claim it was born out of necessity. Others argue it was simply a new face on the same old control tactics. What's not in question is that power abhors a vacuum. And with the guild gone, a vacuum had opened wide. "You want me to help build this?" you ask. "No," she says. "We want you to teach us how not to rebuild what you destroyed." That's a better than expected. She hands you a leather-bound ledger. Inside are scribbled notes, plans, flowcharts, names. all drafted by people who think shadows can be boxed up and filed neatly. You'll review it, she says. You'll advise. And you'll train 3 people. Only 3. Choose wisely. You don't agree. Not yet. But you don't throw the book into the fireplace either. Which, for you, is basically a signed contract. You and Fern stay the night in the royal guest quarters. They smell like lavender and disuse. Knife explores every drawer like he's planning a tiny mouse heist. Before bed, you leaf through the ledger. Page 7 includes a section on ethical elimination protocols. You snort so hard you nearly choke. Page 12 details uniform designs. You make a mental note to burn that page. Page 23 asks, how do we prevent agents from forming private allegiances? You underline it. Twice. Because that's the question no one ever asks until it's too late. In the morning, you leave a list of edits and 3 pages of footnotes. You don't say yes, but you leave the door cracked open. On your way out of the keep, the woman in blue stops you again. You're not what I expected, she says. You say that like it's a compliment. It is. She doesn't ask your real name. No one smart ever does. Back at the safe house, things feel different. Not in a the story's over way, just in a quieter chapter way. People are healing, trusting again. Not many, but some. One evening, you sit by the fire, reading one of the weaver's weird mystery scrolls, when a child from the village knocks on the door. You answer. He hands you a note, smudged and folded 8 times. It reads, asterisk, there's someone in the old garden. Says they knew you before. Asterisk. That could mean anything. It usually means something terrible. But you go anyway. In the garden, beneath the archway of ivy that used to conceal a weapons rack, you find a figure seated on a stump. Hooded. Familiar. It's Rylth. Alive? Barely. He looks thinner. More faded around the edges. Like the kind of person who's haunted by choices, and lately by nightmares. You don't reach for a weapon. He doesn't either. I thought you were dead, you say. I was, he replies. And then I wasn't. You ever regret surviving? Every other Tuesday. He chuckles. I burned the last contract I ever wrote. That's why I'm here. You know it. Good. He looks up at the moon. There's no more guild, is there? No, you reply. Just us. And whatever comes next. He sits in silence for a while longer, then stands. I won't stay. But if you ever need someone who knows how to poison a well with dandelions, I'll call you. He vanishes into the night like a memory reluctantly letting go. And for the first time, you think maybe, just maybe, the world is a little better without the guild in it. You start noticing the quiet more often now. The kind that settles not because it's waiting to be broken, but because there's finally nothing pressing to fear. It's unsettling at first. You find yourself waking in the middle of the night, fingers curled as if around a hilt that isn't there, breath held like an old reflex. And then you remember the guild is gone. Mostly. Because shadows don't disappear. They just stretch, change shape, find new corners to gather in. And one of those corners still exists, like a splinter under the kingdom's skin, a far southern outpost. Isolated, grim, and stubborn. It was always an odd place. Too hot for hoods, too dry for poisons, and too far-flung for regular guild control. But it existed. A chapter of assassins, they're specialized in arid infiltration, venomous insects, and silent sand travel. You call them the Dust Knives. Even the guild's own members rarely spoke of them. Now word reaches Fern, by a pigeon oddly enough that this faction has rearmed itself. No longer calling themselves Dust Knives. Now they go by the Ember Teeth. Still clinging to the guild's old values. Still killing under the pretense of tradition. You head south. Not because you want to. Because if you don't, someone else might, someone louder, less careful, and less interested in giving even the illusion of choice. The desert is vast. Burnt gold dunes stretch endlessly. The wind tastes like salt and ash, and your boots fill with sand so frequently that you stop bothering to empty them. Knife stays tucked in a pocket, only poking out at night, nose twitching at starlight. You find the ember teeth not in a fortress, but in a tent city wrapped around the bones of an ancient temple. The place hums with heat and whispers. No banners, no formal structure, just people who still believe in contracts, who still recite old rites and languages no one's written down in centuries. They don't try to kill you immediately. Progress. Instead, you're brought before someone you recognize or thought you did. Her name was Lara. Back in the day, she handled scorched terrain infiltration. Once infiltrated a caravan for 11 months just to poison one man's wine goblet. Now she's sun-worn, eyes sharper than ever. You, she says. Me, you reply. Regrettably. You here to finish what you started? No. I'm here to ask why you haven't finished. She narrows her eyes. We're not the guild anymore. You kept the name, the customs, the kill ledger. You're wearing ceremonial sand shoes, Lara. They're comfortable. You still chant before every strike? She shrugs. Tradition's not always poison. You and I both know it usually is. There's a pause between you. Thick with things neither of you want to say. Like how she used to be your shadow partner. Or how she once broke protocol to save your life in the Molten Bridge campaign. Or how you once saw her weep when she accidentally killed the wrong target. An innocent glassmaker mistaken for a warlord. Eventually, she sits. Motions for you to sit too. You do. Over weak tea you talk. Not as enemies. Not as allies. Just as people who crawled through the same wreckage and ended up building very different shelters. She tells you the Ember Teeth aren't interested in control. Just survival. Protection. That without the structure, some of them broke. Others turned mercenary. A few wandered into cults. She's trying to give them focus. So you rewrap the monster, you say softly, just in beige. She doesn't argue. But she does show you a ledger. Pages of names and symbols. No deaths. Just people they've pulled in. Talk federal. Some with children now. They call us assassins, she says. But most of us were orphans first. Then soldiers. Then shadows. We never learned to be people. That hits you somewhere deep. Because you know it's true. Historians still argue whether the Ember Teeth were a continuation of the Assassin Guild or an attempt to reform it. Some documents claim they ran covert campaigns for years. Others argue they evolved into a desert cultural collective with militant roots. What's clear is that they didn't disappear, they adapted. That night, Lara takes you to the temple's roof. The stars here are enormous. You can see whole galaxies curling over the horizon. For a moment, it makes everything, the guild, the contracts, the blood, feel so small. She asks you what you'll do next. You answer honestly, I don't know, because you didn't expect to survive this long. You were built to vanish after the mission. Fade into the records with a whisper, a knife in someone else's back. But here you are, alive, breathing, slightly sunburned. Knife curls in your hand, sniffing the hot air like he's memorizing it. You tell Lara she has a choice. Keep calling herself the Ember Teeth and risk becoming what the guild was. Or change. Drop the labels. Teach people how to live, not how to kill. You leave the next morning. No ceremony. No goodbyes. Just a long walk out of the sand. You don't look back. You've learned by now. If something's worth remembering, it'll find its way forward. Back at the safe house, Fern has a new map. One with no pins, just soft ink lines where things might go. Routes for trade, schools, 8 routes through broken territories. No more hit lists. She hands you a note. From Lara. It reads, Asterisk, we're not teeth anymore. Just sand hands. Building, not biting. I hope it's enough asterisk. You smile. Not because it's perfect, but because it's better than before. And after everything, better than before is more than you dared to hope for. You spend the next few weeks doing the strangest thing imaginable. Resting. Not hiding. Not running. Not plotting anyone's downfall. Just breathing. Knife is taken to nesting in Fern's sock drawer. Fern pretends to be annoyed, but she's been cutting extra pieces of wool and calling them sleep scarf for him. There's a boy from the village who brings fresh milk every morning, and one of the local girls insists on showing you every pebble she finds that looks slightly like a skull. You're not sure what kind of life this is turning into, but it's suspiciously gentle. Still, you can't quite relax. Something itches under your skin. Maybe it's habit. Maybe it's trauma wearing a new mask. But it's probably the message you find tucked into the firewood delivery, rolled tight in birch bark, sealed with wax that looks very, very old. It simply says, asterisk, do you remember the rookery? There are still feathers, asterisk. That's not cryptic at all. So you saddle up. You tell Fur not to follow. She insists on following anyway. Knife is already in your bag before you finish tying your boots. The rookery used to be a high guild asset, a literal tower of birds. Owls for night messages, crows for longer hauls, even a few pigeons that were somehow trained to ignore war zones. You haven't been there in years. Last you heard, it burned during a purge mission. But apparently, someone's rebuilt it, or squatted in it. The trail leads north, into forests thick enough to swallow sound. You pass fallen watchtowers, overgrown tripwires, and one extremely judgmental goose that seems to be guarding a bridge. Knife hisses at it. The goose wins. By the time you reach the rookery, dusk is folding over the trees. The tower looms like a half-forgotten thought, stone-chipped, roof patched with canvas, one side covered in ivy. But the birds are there. So many birds. Then a light. Inside, a lone figure sits at a massive table strewn with scrolls, maps, and birdseed. He's writing, slowly, carefully, as if each letter might explode. He doesn't look up when you enter. Took you long enough, he says. Do I know you? You should. He turns. It's Moreland. Alive? Sort of. Older, certainly. His face looks like it's been aged in seawater and regret. The long scar across his jaw is new. His eyes are as sharp as ever, but they carry the weight of someone who's been living with ghosts. I thought you died during the guild collapse, you say? I did, he replies. But apparently, I was too petty to stay dead. You don't know whether to hug him or punch him. So you sit instead. He pours you tea. It's awful. You're still brewing with moss, you mutter. It builds character. What's all this? You gesture at the table, covered in messages, hundreds of them. Tightly rolled notes, hand-drawn courier routes, pieces of wax, and the occasional feather. Whispers, he says. Everything the guild tried to erase. You stare at him. You're collecting the leftovers, preserving them. Not for glory, for warning. So no one forgets how close we came to becoming monsters with paperwork. Historians still argue whether Moreland's post-guild archive was real or romanticized. Some claim his documents laid the foundation for future counterintelligence protocols. Others argue he just wanted to feel useful after the collapse. What's undisputed is that he collected thousands of records and kept them meticulously hidden from royal eyes. He tells you about pockets of guild loyalists still operating under different names, the Lantern Hand, Order of the Pale Cut, even a group that claims to only target corrupt nobles but conveniently defines corrupt as anyone with a better chair. Are they dangerous? You ask. They're scared, he replies. Which makes them dangerous. You walk the rookery with him. Many of the birds still know you. One owl tries to steal your glove. Knife takes this personally and launches a bold but ultimately pathetic air attack. Later that night, Moreland shows you a map marked in red, places where whispers still echo, where contracts have reappeared, where blood has started to pool again. Why are you telling me this, you ask? Because you're the only one who ever understood that killing the guild wasn't the same as killing what made the guild possible. He pauses. You were never the best assassin, he adds, but you might have been the first to know how to stop being one. Well, touching. You stay the night in the rookery. The beds are hard. The dreams are worse. In one, you're back at your first mission. The candle, the knife, the whisper. But this time, the target turns and asks your name, and you don't know how to answer. You wake up before dawn and find Morlin already writing. You leave him a note. Asterisk, burn it all if it ever becomes sacred. The guild wasn't holy. It was a fish and evil asterisk. He'll understand. Back on the road, Fern is quiet. You okay? You ask. No, she replies. But better. Say. When you return to the safe house, Knife bounds into the weaver's yarn basket and immediately gets tangled. Again. You let him. Fern opens her map again. More lines. A few new circles. She hands you a pen. You choose this one, she says. You draw a small X near the coast. No reason, you say. Just, water sounds nice. She smiles. And for the first time, you realize you don't have to be useful anymore. You're allowed to simply exist. Breathe. Help rebuild. Not because you're owed peace, but because you finally believe you deserve it. You don't set out to become a builder, but somehow you do. It starts with a broken fence. Literally. The goats keep escaping, and a man named Otto insists they're being tempted into the forest by sirens disguised as moss. You offer to help, mostly so you can stop hearing about his seductive goats. Next thing you know, you're sketching a new corral system in the dirt with a stick, teaching Fern how to lash timber together with wet bark and rope, and lecturing Knife, who is not listening, about structural integrity. The locals are cautious around you at first. Understandably so. You still move like a shadow. You still sleep with one eye open. And you still flinch when someone says contract, even if they're just talking about a sore muscle. But they grow used to you. The way a town grows used to the smell of the fishmonger. You're tolerated. Then welcomed. Then expected. You teach basic tracking to the kids. You show the baker how to line her door frame with crushed mint to keep beetles away. You even design a rotating lockbox for the herbalist. Nothing fancy, just something a curious 7-year-old can't accidentally open and poison half the village with. You start feeling like a person again. And that's terrifying, because you don't know how long it will last. Every day, you half expect a shadow from the past to emerge. A face you recognize, a blade hidden in bread. But all that arrives is rain, and spring, and one very confused merchant who tries to trade you 6 bundles of cinnamon for assassin services because of a rumor. Fern handles it. You hear her say something about homemade justice and how your knives are now strictly for cutting pears. Later, she frames the cinnamon and hangs it in the kitchen. You visit the coast. The X you marked on the map turns out to be a crumbling lighthouse. Fern cackles when you see it. Symbolism much? You deny the accusation, but start hauling stones anyway. Together, you rebuild. Slowly, patiently. Knife supervises from atop a sun-warmed rock, looking smug. It's not a fortress. It's not a stronghold. It's just a place. A beacon. And slowly, people begin to gather. Some are travelers. Some are lost. A few used to be part of the guild. You recognize the way they scan door frames, count steps between exits, sleep near corners. You don't ask their stories. They'll tell them if they're ready. You establish a simple rule: no contracts, no kills. If you want to leave, you leave. If you stay, you work. If you lie, you fix the privy hole for a week. It works better than you expected. Historians still debate whether your lighthouse settlement was the first post-guild safe zone for former operatives. Some say it was just a quiet coincidence. Others insist it became a kind of sanctuary, later inspiring neutral zones during conflicts between fractured kingdoms. Either way, something grows. Not fast, not grand, but real. You don't write a manifesto. You don't name the place. You just keep fixing roofs, planting herbs, and boiling stew that always tastes a little like regret but fills the belly. One day, a courier arrives. Not the royal kind. A kid, maybe 12, on a pony that seems personally offended by the world. The letter she carries is sealed in blue wax. You open it. It reads, Asterisk, dear ghost. You won't recognize the name, but I knew the guild too. I'm trying to start something new. Something better. I've heard what you're doing. If it's true, I'd like to visit. Maybe we could compare mistakes. Sincerely, a former Blade Asterisk. You show Fern. She just raises an eyebrow and says, Told you we needed more bowls. That night, you sit on the lighthouse steps. The sea is calm. The stars are soft. The old world still sleeps in your bones, but it's quieter now. Less bite, more whisper. Knife curls at your feet. Fern hums off key while fixing a lantern. You think about what comes next. Maybe you'll teach more. Maybe you'll finally write down all the old escape routes, not for use, but so someone can look at them and say, Asterisk, we used to need these. We don't anymore, asterisk. Maybe you'll finally build that library Morlin always dreamed of. With a trapdoor, of course. You're not entirely reformed. And maybe, just maybe, you'll plant something that outlasts your name. Because now you understand something the guild never taught. Death is easy. It's survival that takes skill. And building a life, that takes everything. Knife wakes you at dawn by coughing up a pine cone. You're not even sure how he got it. He glares at you like it's your fault, then falls asleep on your chest as if nothing happened. You ease out of bed with the grace of someone who used to kill people for a living and now has lower back pain. Outside, the wind carries the salty breath of the sea, and you swear the lighthouse groans as if it, too, is getting old. Fern is already outside, balancing on one leg atop a fence post. You're not sure if it's martial arts or boredom, and you don't ask. She waves a piece of parchment at you like it's a victory flag. Another letter. This one in a plain wrap, no wax seal, just charcoal handwriting. You take it. Read it. Blank. It's from a girl in a far village. Someone who heard the lighthouse, wants to learn, wants to reclaim her body after it was trained to hurt. Her words, not yours. You sit down. Carefully. The letter feels heavier than it is. Fern leans against you. This happens more and more. She's right. Over the last few months, letters have trickled in. First from former assassins, then mercenaries, then spies. Some just want quiet. Some want to unlearn. A few want to be useful again, but on their own terms. You never advertised this place. It just became visible somehow, through whispers, wandering birds, or the sheer gravitational pull of not being a monster anymore. So you start organizing. You clear out the barn and turn it into a training hall, not for killing, but for balance, breathing, and not flinching when someone knocks on the door. You let Fern lead sessions. She's a better teacher anyway. Kinder too. You host one-on-one talks. You listen more than you speak. You offer tea. It's bad like always, but you've stopped apologizing for it. A boy named Nori starts sketching everyone who passes through. His drawings are a mix of brutal honesty and soft exaggeration. You look taller in his version. Knife looks even smugger. One day, Nori shows you a portrait he's made of you. You made me smile, you say. He shrugs. You were. It's disarming. Historians still argue whether the so-called lighthouse school was truly revolutionary or just a fluke of history, a place where a few broken people happened to heal together, out of sight of crowns and crusades. But some say it shifted how kingdoms view the usefulness of former killers. You don't care about the politics of it. What matters is that people come and stay and get better. Some leave after a season, carrying dried herbs and a tiny knife that isn't for combat but for whittling. Others stay for good, fixing roofs and raising goats and arguing about whether porridge should have salt or honey. It's honey. It's always honey. You don't care what Otto says. You even start getting visits from guild historians, the good kind. The curious ones. They ask questions like, Asterisk, how did your training affect your memory? Asterisk, did you ever feel proud of a clean kill? Asterisk, do you think morality was ever part of the guild? You give them what you can. You don't lie. But you don't linger either. There's a part of you that still remembers the weight of silence. How it kept you alive. How it crushed you. So now you choose what to share. One day, an old man shows up. He walks with a cane and smells like copper and ink. His eyes are sharp, and when he speaks, his voice cuts through fog. I taught you blade work, he says. You threw a knife at my shoe, only because you said I'd never beat your reflexes. He nods. Fair. You stare at each other for a long time. Then, without another word, you sit on the cliffside and share tea. He doesn't say why he's here. You don't ask. But he stays a week, helps repair the north wall, and then disappears into the mist like something remembered too late. More come. A woman with no tongue, but very clear opinions. A pair of twins who speak in tandem and build an oven that bakes exactly one perfect loaf per day. A former interrogator who now carves tiny animals out of bone. Some of them never talk about their past. Others don't shut up about it. That's fine. Healing is messy. You tell them what you always tell newcomers. There's no redemption here. Only rhythm. Keep showing up. Keep building. That's enough. You believe it now. One night, Fern finds you staring out over the water. You're twitchy, she says. You nod. I think something's ending. She doesn't ask what. She knows. The past doesn't knock loudly. It's a scratch under the skin. A smell in air, and something tells you the quiet you've built isn't permanent. But that's okay, because even if it happened, and it mattered. The quiet breaks on a Tuesday. It always would have, you suppose. Tuesdays have the same energy as a dagger wrapped in bread, unassuming, but a little suspicious. The sky's gray when it happens. The kind of gray that doesn't rain, just hovers like it's waiting for something worse. You're repairing a cracked beam in the storeroom when you hear the bell. A single chime, low, measured. The lighthouse bell has one purpose, warning. It's not a dinner call, not a celebration. It's only ever rung when someone sees something on the horizon that makes their stomach twist. You're on your feet in seconds. Fern is already climbing the tower ladder. Knife streaks past, fur fluffed, tail at full mast. Below, the settlement moves like muscle memory. Buckets filled, shutters latched, children gathered. You reach the top. There it is. A ship. No two. No more. 7 sails. Dark. Crestless. Fast. One of the children hands you a spyglass. You raise it, squint, and feel your ribs tighten. The symbol isn't familiar. Not exactly. But the pattern is. Black sun. Landrace. Double-slashed mast. It's a new order. But it smells like the old guild. Fern is next to you. Think they're looking for us? Think they're looking for something to burn, you mutter. You could run. Again. You've done it before. Disappear into the trees. Abandon the place before it becomes a grave. But something roots you. You helped build this place. You helped these people. You grew vegetables for crying out loud. Real ones. Not poison-laced. Not distraction crops. Honest vegetables. You aren't running this time. Back on the ground, you gather the community. They're scared, but they're ready. You've taught them. Prepared them. Not for war, but for defense. We're not assassins anymore, you say. But we still know how to disappear. Some pack up. The youngest and oldest start moving inland, following mapped routes to backup shelters. Knife rides in someone's cloak, looking both heroic and extremely over this. You organize rotations. You hide records. You bury scrolls in oil-sealed jars. By sunset, the lighthouse is dark. No fire. No light. Just silence. And then the ships land. Historians still debate whether this arrival was truly hostile or simply a scouting expedition by a fringe guild faction. Some suggest the ships were part of a wider plan to reclaim old guild assets and territories. All you know is they're armed. Figures pour off the ships, faces hidden by dark cloth and mirrored lenses. Their movements are efficient, clean. You recognize the posture, the spacing. They've been trained, but they're not the same. You see it in how they check behind themselves constantly, unsure, in how they step too cautiously, as if not trusting the ground. They search, but they don't find. Because what you've built isn't a fortress. It's a ghost town on purpose. Empty looking, unthreatening. They fall for it. The ones who venture too far inland get turned around by trails you've deliberately crisscrossed. They find harmless clay pots where there should have been records. Straw beds that smell of old goats. You watch from above, silent as wind. You don't attack. You don't defend. You let the past look and find nothing to bite. On the third night, a group breaks into the lighthouse itself. You let them. They climb the steps, and at the top, they find a single chair, a tiny fire, and a letter pinned to the wall. Asterisk, we've already survived this once. We're not going to do it again. There's nothing here for you. Go build something better if you can, asterisk. They leave before dawn. No one speaks as the ships drift away. Not a single bird breaks the air. It's as if the entire coast exhales at once. Later, people return. Quietly, one by one. A bowl of soup here. A repaired roof there. Life creeps back in. Knife decides to sleep directly in the ashes of a lighthouse fire, possibly as a statement. You clean the mess. You write new maps. You bury the old ones deeper this time. That night, Fern finds you sitting on the steps again. Same spot. Same sea. She doesn't say anything. She just hands you a stone. Smooth. Warm from her pocket. It's shaped almost exactly like the guild's crest. But it's been broken cleanly in half. You toss it into the sea. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just finally. Because you're done carrying it. You sleep through the next sunrise. For the first time in months, maybe years, your dreams don't replay old kills or old fears. No sudden blade through the curtain. No echo of footsteps you missed. Just waves. Firelight. A goat eating someone's laundry. Peace. When you wake, Knife is stretched across your chest like he owns your lungs. Outside, the sound of hammering is back. Not frantic, just normal. Someone is fixing a chair. Someone else is probably cursing about nails again. That rhythm has returned. You sit up slowly. Old joints, old muscles. Still here. Still yours. Fern walks in with breakfast. It's porridge. With honey. She doesn't even bother asking anymore. We have a new arrival, she says, casual as rain. 12 years old. Says her name is Cinder. Wants to learn knots and disappear from rooftops. You know it. Take a bite. It's too hot. It always is. You head out to the garden later, where Cinder is helping Nori dig up wild onions. She glances at you, eyes darting. She has that look, sharp, measuring, a little afraid of kindness. You sit beside her and hand her a sharper spade. She takes it like a test, which it kind of is. You here to fight, you ask. She shakes her head. No. I'm here to stop fighting. Good answer. You don't give her a lecture. You just start digging beside her, letting the silence do the teaching. Knife watches from the fence post like a little tyrant. The onions don't protest. The wind stirs the trees, and the lighthouse creaks just slightly, like it's remembering how to breathe. Later, you and Fern walk the cliffs again. It's a clear day. You can see the outline of the next village, a speck where the hills kiss the sea. I think I'll start writing it down, you tell her. What? All of it? She raises an eyebrow. A memoir? More like a reminder. She shrugs. Use your dramatic voice. People like that. You laugh. A soft one. Tired one. But real. You spend the next weeks putting pen to paper. You don't start with the blood or the blades. You start with a broken fence. With the goats. With a pinecone knife hacked up. You name names where it matters. Leave others blank. You describe the burn of old shame, the weight of memory, and the joy of a stew shared in silence. You even mention the time someone accidentally turned the training hall into a beehive because they thought the bees were symbolic. Historians still argue whether your writings were ever truly meant for publication. Some believe they were instructions. Others call them parables. A few just think they were your way of filing the pain away under something useful. Doesn't really matter. What matters is that it helped someone. Someone like Cinder, who eventually learns to build instead of vanish. Or like Otto, who stops yelling about seductive goats and starts teaching fermentation. Or like Knife, who finds a second kitten and reluctantly shares his blanket. And like you, who learn, after all this time, that you don't have to be useful to deserve rest. That survival isn't penance. That some scars just get softer with time. One morning, you wake up to find someone has carved a tiny symbol into the lighthouse door frame. It's not a guild mark, not a thread, just a circle with a flame inside. You smile. You don't need to ask who did it. The meaning is clear. You're not a weapon anymore. You're a light. And for the first time in your life, you are finally, completely, utterly safe. /word count 1027. Went down 300 words. And now, you breathe out slowly. The sea fades into a hush. The cliffs soften into shadows. The lighthouse, your lighthouse, stands tall, quiet now, its stones warmed by decades of sun and patient wind. Knife is curled beside you, his tiny snores like the ticking of a very lazy clock. You stretch, just a little, and let the last images of the past dissolve into something distant. Not erased, just placed gently on a shelf in your mind, like an old coat you no longer wear. Fern's laughter echoes in the distance. There's stew bubbling, probably too thick. Someone's playing a pipe out of tune, and no one has the heart to correct them. That's the kind of place this is now. The kind where things don't have to be perfect to be peaceful. You watch the horizon. Ships don't worry you anymore. You don't count their sails or trace their flags. You don't reach for the knife under your bed. In fact, you're not sure it's even still there. You might have used it last week to open a stubborn jar of jam. Funny how things change. And now, with a breeze weaving through your window and your blanket tucked just right, you let your eyes close. No tension in your shoulders. No last scan of the room. Just the rhythm of rest. The quiet confidence of someone who made it to the other side. You are not the ghost anymore. You are the calm. You are home. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.